It began without thunder, without omen, only that sudden strangling of sound. One heartbeat. The hall roared with feasting. The next, the mead froze mid-pour, and every laugh, every lute note, every clash of tankard and shield vanished into a hollow stillness. The air thickened like frost, pressing down on the lungs. Warriors of 100 ages looked around in disbelief, mouths open but voices stolen. Then came the hum, low, steady, the kind of sound that does not travel through air but through bone, like the memory of an earthquake that never ends. Odin's great wolves paused mid-snarl. Their hackles lifted toward nothing. The torches still burned, but the flames no longer flickered. They stood in place, stiff and motionless, as though remembering how to dance but refusing to. Even the banners along the golden rafters hung straight down, heavy with an unseen weight. It was as if time itself had chosen to hold its breath. Bragi, keeper songs, was the first to move. His harp hung silent in his hands, its strings quivering slightly, though he hadn't touched them. He looked to the All-Father's throne, expecting a command, a glare, a word of wrath. But Odin's single eye was turned inward, his gaze not upon the hall, but somewhere far beyond it, into the void between beats of existence. The hum deepened, resonant now, crawling under the long tables and into bones of the benches, into the marrow of the fallen heroes who sat petrified. Then the light dimmed, not from the torches of the hearth, but from the air itself. The gold began to tarnish. The silver dulled, and even the mead lost its glow, turning to a shadowed amber. The hum pulsed once, twice, like a heart struggling to remember its rhythm. A single feather drifted from above, sleek, black, unmistakably belonging to one of Odin's ravens. Yet Hug, Gin, and Munin were nowhere to be seen. The feather touched the floor and dissolved into smoke that curled upward, forming a shape, no large in the hand, but unmistakably an eye. It opened without lashes or lid, and from it bled a faint light, pale as dawn over ice. Who dares disturb the song? Bragi whispered, though he had not meant to speak. The words escaped him on instinct, and when they reached the air, they did not echo. They were swallowed whole. The hum shifted tone, flattening into something close to a voice, but not speech, not sound. It was intention, old as the first silence before creation. The gods felt in their chests, in their skulls, in the fragments of all lives they had consumed through prayer and myth. It was not the voice of any god they knew. Odin stood then, slow and deliberate, the weight of ages grinding in his knees. He raised Gungnir, but even the spear hummed with that alien resonance. The All-Father's beard stirred though there was no wind. "Something beneath the root," he said quietly, and his voice seemed to crack the stillness just enough for one tremor of reality to return. "Something older than us remembers." Thor slammed his fist upon the table, the echo of defiance against the hush. Then let it show itself. But the sound of his blow was thin, strangled, as though the world did not wish to acknowledge rage any more. From the corners of the hall, the shadows began to move, not spreading, not growing, but folding. They peeled away from the walls like wet parchment, coiling inward until they met beneath the great roof. In that gathered darkness, faint shapes flickered, faces of mortals long forgotten, eyes hollow, lips mouthing songs that no longer existed. The hum was their mourning. One of the Valkyries stepped forward, her armor dimming like a star behind clouds. "It is the end of Echo," she said, her voice steady but trembling beneath. "When the last story is told, even gods fall silent." But Bragi shook his head, clutching his harp as if it were the last heartbeat of the world. "No, the stories do not die, they migrate." He plucked one string, and for a moment, sound existed again, a thin, silver note that trembled against the dark. Every head turned toward it. The note hung there, defiant, until the hum absorbed it. Odin's ravens reappeared then, bursting through the high windows with a flurry of ash. Their calls were muted, like memories underwater. They circled the throne, frantic, and dropped a fragment of something metallic at the god's feet, a small ring of blackened iron, inscribed with runes none could read. It pulsed faintly in time with the hum. "Not of Asgard," said Freya, eyes narrowing. "Not even of Yggdrasil's shadow." The All-Father bent to pick it up, and when his fingers brushed the cold metal, the hum stopped. For a single heartbeat, the world was truly silent, too silent. The warriors felt the weight of existence tilt, as though sound itself had been a spell that kept reality intact. And then, from the depths below Valhalla, something exhaled. The ground quaked. Mead spilled, not because it was pushed, but because gravity itself remembered to function again. The torches flickered violently, their flames screaming light instead of sound. The hum returned, faster, higher, now 1,000 overlapping tones weaving a pattern no ear could follow. Odin's eye glowed, and he spoke not in words but in runes that vibrated in the air like sparks. "This is no mortal silence," he said. "This is a remembering of the first void." The floor split, and a crack of absolute darkness crawled across the hall, devouring what it touched, not with hunger, but with indifference. Warriors stumbled back, clutching at each other, feeling their own names tremble on their tongues, almost erased. Bragi's heart broke, its own strings one by one. Thor swung Mjolnir into the abyss, but the hammer vanished mid-arc. No flash, no thunder, just gone. The silence behind the hum deepened, and every god knew it was listening. From that rift rose a lightless wind that smelled of cold stone and the breath of things never born. The hum resolved at last into a single, clear voice that all could understand but none could locate. "You were never meant to be eternal," it said, "only to remember." Odin lowered his spear. The weight of meaning fell heavier than any battle. Around him, gods who had never known fear now felt the absence of being acknowledged. The hum faded into distance, leaving a trembling quiet. Cups rested where they had been frozen. A single drop of mead rolled from the rim and hit the floor, echoing louder than thunder. Valhalla remained standing, but the song that had once filled its golden ribs was gone. What lingered was awareness of the moment before the first sound ever existed, and the knowledge that one day the hall would hum again, when even silence forgot what it meant to be still. Runa woke to the sound of her own pulse roaring like surf inside her skull. The room was dim, the pale light of morning shivering through the cracks in the wooden shutters. But it was not the dawn that stirred her. It was the ringing, sharp and alive, crawling under her skin. She reached up and found blood on her ears, warm and sticky, as though the night itself had whispered too close. The echo pulsed behind her eyes, rhythmic and deliberate, not the echo of any dream. It was as if something vast had spoken her name inside her head, and her mortal body had not been built to bear the weight of it. She sat up slowly, the bed creaking, the world distorted. The air carried sound like water, thick, distorted, endless. A drop of rain outside became a drumbeat. The crack of wood in the hearth, a thunderclap. She pressed her palms over her ears, but the noise came from within, not without. Beneath it, woven like a thread through all creation, she could hear the hum again, the same one that had silenced Valhalla. In her childhood, she had thought her gift a blessing. The elders had called her chosen, said the gods had kissed her ears before birth. She could hear the prayers of the sea, the rhythm of roots drinking deep in the soil, the sigh of stars turning in their sleep. Her songs were said to heal heartbreak, to quiet storms. But at 20 winters, the gift had curdled. She had begun to hear things no mortal should. Laughter beneath tombs, the murmurs of unborn souls, the footfalls of gods walking through realms that should have been forever closed. That night, the night before the blood, she had dreamt of a hall with torches frozen mid-flame, a feast caught between breaths. She had seen Odin's eye open into the void, seen the crack across the golden floor. And then she had heard it, the hum, low and endless, calling her by name though no one in that dream world should have known it. Now awake, she realized it was not dream at all. The gods had not stopped speaking. They had simply chosen a mortal to hear what they no longer could bear to say to each other. She staggered outside into the dawn. The village of Erby lay still, smoke rising from distant chimneys. The mountains ahead stood like sleeping beasts, their spines outlined against a bruised sky. But Runa could hear everything beneath that calm. The conversations of stone shifting under frost, the veins of water threading through the peaks, the heartbeats of people still lost in sleep. It was too much. The sound poured into her, unending, until she thought she might dissolve under it. And yet, buried within the chaos, one melody persisted, a simple pattern of 3 notes, repeating each softer than the last. It came from the east, where the mountains met the horizon. She knew then there was not a song made by man or beast, but a residue of divine thought, the echo of a god's dying memory. Her curse was not madness. It was inheritance. She took her harp, the only thing that had ever steadied her, and set off barefoot down the frozen path. Every step struck music from the ground. Even the wind tried to follow her rhythm, bending reeds and pine needles into whispering accompaniment. Travelers she passed along the road crossed themselves or turned away, sensing the strange vibration that clung to her like heat. By the time she reached the river that marked the edge of mortal lands, the melody had grown louder. It throbbed through the water, resonating in her bones. The current shimmered faintly, and when she leaned closer, she saw faces moving just beneath the surface. Not spirits, not reflections, but impressions of divine silence. They were the gods' thoughts, trapped after the hum. They pulsed, unspoken and unremembered, seeking the one who could give them voice again. Runa knelt, trembling, and touched the water. The sound exploded in her skull, 1,000 fragments of forgotten prayers. She saw the hall again. Valhalla collapsed into quiet ruin, and Odin's shadow standing alone before the void. His mouth moved, but she could not hear the words. Instead, the hum turned into rhythm, and rhythm into pulse, and pulse into command. Play. She set her harp against her knees, her fingers slick with the river's chill. The first note came out wrong, bending the air like glass. The second pierced through the clouds. The third, she did not strike it. It struck itself, born from the echo within her. And the world responded. The trees bowed. The river froze mid-current. In distant Asgard, where the gods waited in the silence of shame and fear, something shifted. The faintest vibration across the empty feast tables. They felt it, but could not name it. The song had found its way back to them through mortal blood, but the gift took its price. With every note, the ringing in Runa's head grew sharper. Blood streamed down her neck, and still she played. The melody was no longer hers. It was memory speaking through her flesh. When she reached the final chord, the air itself seemed to pause, and a single voice emerged from the vibration, ancient and weary. You are the bridge between silence and sound. Then the river released her. She fell backward onto the frost, gasping, deaf now to everything but her own pulse. The curse had consumed her hearing, yet the hum remained, softer now, like a heartbeat resting against her spirit. The gods had spoken, and she had survived, but only barely. When she awoke, days later, she was not in her village. She lay inside a cave where no echo lived, and beside her harp the air shimmered faintly, as though sound itself had taken form to watch over her. Her hands shook when she tried to play again, but no tone emerged. Silence, this time, was mercy, and still, deep in her bones, she felt it, the last fragment of divine rhythm, pulsing slow and eternal. Somewhere beyond mountains and memory, Valhalla waited, not singing, but listening. And Runa, mortal harpist of the fallen gods, knew her task was not to quiet the hum, but to teach the world how to hear it without bleeding. The bird arrived at dusk, when the sky was the color of bruised metal and the mountains had begun to swallow the light. Runa heard it before she saw it, an arrhythmic beating of wings that carried no air, only soundless pressure. She looked up, and there was, descending like a shard of the dying sun, feathers black as oil, streaked with veins of molten gold. When it landed before her, snow hissed where its tears fell, each drop melting a perfect circle into the white. It was no ordinary raven. Its eyes were blind with light, twin suns dimmed by sorrow. The air around it quivered with the remnants of words unsaid, echoes so ancient they could no longer find form. The creature tilted its head, studying her, and the hum returned, not from within her skull this time, but radiating softly from the space between them. Runa knew, before thought could name it, whose servant this was. She had seen its shadow in her visions, perched upon Odin's shoulder, whispering secrets of men in memory. Now it came alone, wings heavy with grief, golden tears still falling, each one burning the purity of the snow. "You've come from the silence," she murmured. Her own voice sounded foreign, a fragile reed in a vast hall of absence. The raven did not answer. It only lowered its head, and for a moment she thought it might collapse from the weight of its sorrow. She knelt, trembling, and extended a hand. The bird did not flinch. When her fingertips brushed its feathers, heat lanced through her body, a memory, not hers, unfurling like fire. She saw Valhalla undone, torches extinguished, God staring into the wound in the world where sound had once lived. Odin standing alone before that chasm, his ravens circling until one turned back toward the mortal realm. Go! The All-Father had commanded without voice. Find the echo. Find the mortal who still hears. And so it had flown, across lifetimes, through realms drained of color, until it reached her. Runa gasped and withdrew her hand, smoke curling from her fingertips. The raven blinked once, and something small and bright fell from its eye. Not a tear this time, but a sliver of metal shaped like a rune. It struck the snow and did not melt. The symbol pulsed faintly, gold bleeding into the white. She recognized it. The rune for Kenas, light, knowledge, transformation through fire. The same rune her mother had embroidered on her swaddling cloth when she was born, never knowing why. Now it glowed before her like a commandment. You want me to take it, she said softly. The raven remained still, its breathing shallow, as if the very act of being near her cost it the last of its strength. She picked up the rune, the hum inside her chest aligned with its pulse. The warmth was unbearable and holy. Images cascaded behind her eyes. The first sound at the dawn of the world, the cry that tore existence from stillness, the rhythm that gods had once used to weave fate. And within those visions, she saw the truth. Odin's silence was not loss, but retreat. The gods had sealed themselves away from the sound because it had grown too loud, too alive. They had forgotten how to listen without bending the world to their will. The hum was calling her to restore that balance, to return the echo to those who had silenced it. The raven stepped closer and pressed its beak to her heart. The contact seared through her tunic, marking her skin with the outline of a feather made of light. It was not pain, but recognition, the forging of a bridge between divine and mortal pulse. I understand, she whispered, though she was not sure she did. The raven looked up one last time, wings twitching, its body trembling, as though it could no longer bear its own existence. Then, slowly, it began to dissolve, not into ash or shadow, but into light. Each feather detached and rose upward, weightless, vanishing into gray sky until nothing remained but a single golden tear frozen in the air. It hovered for a heartbeat, then drifted toward her and sank into her chest. Silence followed, vast and absolute. But within that silence, she heard something new, a pattern hidden behind the hum, a heartbeat that was not her own. The gods were listening. Runa sank to her knees, snow clinging to her hair, the rune still glowing in her palm. The world around her pulsed in rhythm with her breath. She felt the distant stirrings of Valhalla, the slow awakening of memory across its walls. The echo that had silenced the gods was returning to them. But through her, through mortal hands and mortal suffering. She wept then, not from pain, but from the weight of purpose. The tears froze before they fell, turning to small amber stones in the snow. The hum steadied, soft as the breath of dawn. Somewhere beyond the mountains, thunder rolled without sound. Runa looked at the horizon and whispered to no one, "If the gods will not sing, then mortals must." And in answer, a faint shimmer rippled across the sky, gold bleeding through gray, the last trace of the raven's flight, vanishing toward a realm that had forgotten how to listen. He came out of the fog like a rumor, broad-shouldered, unshaven, a ruin of man wrapped in furs that had forgotten the scent of fire. The axe on his back was pitted with age and salt, as though it had tasted 1,000 storms and still hungered for the next. When he stepped onto the clearing where Runa sat beside the remains of the raven's light, the air itself seemed to flinch. The hum that had pulsed gently within her since the messenger's visit swelled suddenly, almost eager, as if recognizing him. He stopped a few paces away. His eyes were pale and far away, like frost under moonlight, neither cruel nor kind, only tired. He looked at her not as a man looks upon another soul, but as one ghost regards another in the brief moment before dawn dissolves them both. "Are you real?" he asked, voice low, uncertain. It wasn't a question of sanity. It was a question of someone who had been tricked by his own endurance for too long. "I could ask the same," she replied. He chuckled once, dry as snow dust. Then we're already kin. He dropped to one knee, setting his axe in the snow. They told me once that when the gods fall silent, the dead will begin to speak through the living. I thought it madness. Now I'm not sure it isn't mercy. Runa studied him. Who told you that? He stared into the ground as if it might answer for him. I don't know. I remember no faces, no home, only the battles, and even those blur. I was a berserker once. When my war ended, I did not. I woke again the next morning, always whole, always hungry, never finished. He touched his chest, where a scar should have been. It seems I misplaced my reason for being. Runa's heart tightened. The hum between them vibrated like a thread being plucked. Then perhaps it isn't lost, she said. Perhaps it's buried under silence. He looked up sharply, something flickering in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or hope refusing to die completely. You hear it too, he said. She nodded. I hear everything. Then we are doomed together, he murmured. The wind shifted, scattering light snow across their footprints. For a moment, the world seemed smaller, bound by the invisible music connecting them. Egil tilted his head, listening. It's in the ground, he said softly, under our feet, like drums beneath the ice. It's the hum, she answered, the same that silenced Valhalla. The gods are listening again, but they cannot yet understand. He frowned, gripping the haft of his axe, as though it anchored him to meaning. If they listen, why send us instead of their own? Because we bleed, Runa said, and they have forgotten how. That silenced him. He sat beside her without a word, the weight of his immortality settling between them like another presence. For a while they simply listened, to the hiss of melting snow where the raven's golden tears had fallen, to the pulse of something ancient in the distance. Egil closed his eyes. I used to fight for glory, he said, then for revenge, then because I've forgotten how to stop. But now, all that remains is this noise, this hum. I followed it for weeks through forests that refused to echo. It led me here. Then it wants us both, Runa said. He nodded. To what end? Before she could answer, the hum swelled. The snow around them rippled like water, and the light dimmed until the world seemed carved from shadow and frost. Voices began to murmur within the hum, distant, layered, indistinguishable, like the ghosts of forgotten tongues trying to pronounce a single word. Runa clutched her harp. Egil rose, axe ready. Shapes flickered in the fog. Warriors without faces, armor rusted by centuries. They moved without sound, phantoms drawn to the resonance vibrating between Runa's heart and Egil's weapon. One stepped forward, its eyes twin voids, and when it opened its mouth, no words came, only the hum amplified. Runa felt her blood turn to light. She raised the glowing rune the raven had left her. Its fire spread across her palm, illuminating the wraiths. They're echoes, she said. The memories of battle, fragment of sound that never found rest. Egil took a step forward, his immortal presence a counterpoint to their emptiness. Then let them hear, he said, and slammed the butt of his axe into the earth. The shock wave burst outward, cracking the frozen ground. The hum wavered, startled, as if it had not expected resistance. Runa plucked a single note from her harp, one that trembled with divine cadence, and the air rippled. The echoes recoiled, their forms unraveling into glimmers of gold and smoke. The hum steadied again, now pulsing in harmony with the two of them. When the last wraith dissolved, Egil turned to her. You play as though you remember creation itself. She smiled faintly. Maybe I'm only reminding it that it still exists. They made camp under the twisted pines. The fire refused to crackle. It burned silently, like a light dreaming of warmth. Runa cleaned her harp. Egil stared into nothing, hands trembling as though remembering pain he no longer possessed. Do you ever wish to die? She asked quietly. Every day, he said. But I think death forgot my name. Runa looked into the flame, its light reflecting in her tired eyes. Then maybe that's why we were called. Not to die, but to remember what dying means. Egil grunted. And to whom does that lesson belong? To the gods, she said. They mistaken silence for peace. The hum deepened again, as though agreeing. Far in the distance, over mountains veiled in cloud, thunderless lightning crawled across the horizon. The air vibrated with promise and dread. Runa and Egil stood together at dawn, the snow glowing faintly under the newborn light. The rune on her chest shimmered. The mark of the raven pulsed against her heart. Egil adjusted the strap of his axe, watching her. "Where to now?" he asked. "North," she said, "toward the place where sound was born and where it died." He smirked, weary and amused. If the gods wait there, they'd best be ready to listen. She met his gaze, her voice steady. "They will, or the world will learn to sing without them." And as they walked into the pale horizon, the hum followed, no longer oppressive but expectant. Behind them, the snow melted in spirals of gold where their footprints had been, and above, a single raven's cry, silent yet unmistakable, echoed across the quiet sky. They found her near the edge of the glacier, a small shape against the pallid expanse. Barefoot, unblinking, her hair stiff with frost. The wind bent around her in unnatural silence, as though the world itself feared to make a sound near her. Even Egil, who had marched through battlefields where the dying screamed in harmony with thunder, felt his breath still. Runa felt it too, the hum, which had once resonated like a heartbeat beneath her ribs, now muffled as if trapped under a glass dome. The child was humming something of her own, barely audible, the tone fractured, half melody and half memory. When she turned to face them, her eyes were the color of frozen rain, clear and unreachable. She could not have been more than 12 winters old, yet the air bent to her emotions like reeds before a storm. Around her feet lay fragments of ice shaped like symbols, runes formed not by hand but by tears. Each one gleamed faintly, still weeping tiny trails of vapor as they froze the snow beneath. Egil whispered, "She's the source." "No," Runa said softly. "She's the consequence." The girl's lips parted, and a single note escaped. The world stopped again. Egil's heartbeat faltered. Runa felt the sound tear through her thoughts, an echo so pure it split memory from the present. Then came the stillness, not silence, but absence. Every sound within the valley, the wind, the river beneath the ice, even the faint hum of life, froze mid-motion. When the stillness broke, it was Runa's harp that revived it. She plucked one trembling note, just enough to ripple the air between them. The sound reached the girl like a touch, and she flinched. For the first time, something human flickered across her expression. Fear, confusion, perhaps recognition. "My name is Runa," she said gently. "What's yours?" The girl tilted her head, as if trying to remember whether names still existed. "Kelda," she murmured at last. Her voice came out brittle, like ice cracking over deep water. "Are you the one who listens to the gods?" Runa hesitated. Sometimes, when they remember to speak. Kelda's gaze drifted toward Egil, who stood motionless, frost crawling along the edge of his axe. "And him? He listens to what refuses to die," Runa answered. The child nodded as if that made perfect sense. Then her breath hitched, and the air around her flashed white. Sound began to splinter again. Runa stepped forward instinctively, placing herself between the girl and the storm her fear summoned. "It's all right," she whispered, her words trembling. "You can let it move through you. You don't have to hold it." Kelda shook her head violently. "If I don't hold it, it hurts the world." Tears welled up, crystallizing before they could fall. One slid down her cheek, landing in the snow where it solidified into a rune shaped like algies, the sign of protection. It glowed softly, then stilled. Egil watched in grim awe. She freezes what she fears, even sound. Runa knelt, her breath frosting the air between them. "The gods' hum frightened you, didn't it?" Kelda's shoulders trembled. "It woke me. It said my name, but I don't remember ever being born." Runa's pulse quickened. She could feel the hum trying to reach the child, bending its resonance around her frozen barrier. This girl was no accident. She was the echo's defense, a living frost grown out of divine memory, to shield what remained of sound from collapsing into chaos. "Egil," Runa said, not taking her eyes off Kelda. "She's part of it." The hum chose her. Egil knelt beside them, the air warming faintly as his presence disrupted the frost. Then we have to teach her not to fear what she is. The child looked between them, confusion warring with the instinct to flee. You don't understand, she whispered. When I'm afraid, I make the world quiet. But when I'm calm, her eyes fill with light. It screams. Runa reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. Then we'll teach it to sing instead. For a moment, the three of them sat in that delicate stillness. The immortal warrior, the cursed harpist, the frostborn child. Above them, the sky rippled with muted auroras, ribbons of color trembling like sound waves made visible. The hum returned, cautious, circling them as though testing the air. Kelda's runes began to glow faintly, one by one, until the snow around her became a constellation of frozen light. Runa could read fragments of meaning in their shapes. Fear, remembrance, awakening. When she touched one, it melted into warmth instead of ice, and a faint voice, ancient, aching, whispered through her mind. The child carries our unspoken grief. Runa looked up at Egil. The gods wept her into being. Egil stared at the girl, his jaw set. Then she's the world's apology. The wind sighed again, tentative, relearning how to move. Somewhere deep within the glacier, a crack echoed. The first sound Kelda hadn't frozen. The girl gasped, startled, but this time Runa smiled. That's it, she said. Let the sound live. Let it be afraid with you. Kelda nodded slowly, and her next tear did not freeze. It fell as water, steaming slightly where it touched the cold earth. The rune might have become dissolved before forming, and the hum swelled, alive again. Egil rose, shouldering his axe. She can unmake the silence. Runa stood beside him, her fingers brushing the strings of her harp. No, she said, she can forgive it. Behind them, the glacier shifted, groaning like a wounded god awakening after too long a sleep. The auroras brightened, and the hum deepened, resonant with something new. Hope, fragile but real. Kelda reached for Runa's hand. If I come with you, she asked softly, will the world stop breaking when it remembers to feel? Runa squeezed her fingers. Maybe not, but it will learn to listen again. The frost receded in a slow, spiraling pattern around the three of them, revealing the first hints of green moss beneath. The child's tears stopped falling. The hum steadied, clear as breath, and far above, somewhere unseen, Valhalla stirred, its silence cracking like thin ice on the first footstep of spring. The bridge waited for them beyond the glacier, rising from the mist like a wound stitch between worlds. Its surface was not stone nor wood, but something alive, woven from threads of pale light that vibrated softly with each breath of wind. It arched over an abyss that had no bottom, only a trembling shimmer of sound below, as if the air itself were remembering all the words ever swallowed by fear. Runa felt the hum before she saw the bridge clearly. It was not the steady pulse that had followed her since Valhalla's silence. This was older, more intimate, a tapestry of half-formed syllables, sighs, prayers, laughter never voiced, and names never spoken aloud. Each vibration carried the ache of something that had once wished to exist but hadn't found courage enough. The closer she stepped, the more it recognized her, the harpist who heard everything. Egil frowned at the structure. It sings, he said. No, Runa replied. It remembers singing. Kelda stood between them, holding her small hands over her ears. The sound didn't frighten her. It unsettled her because it was familiar. The bridge's hum mirrored the tremor of her own heart. Each tone she had ever frozen now returned to her, thawed and mournful. It knows me, she whispered. It knows where I tried to hide. Egil tested the first plank of light with his boot, and it held, humming deeper beneath his weight. When he stepped again, the bridge whispered something, soft, near his ear, a name. He froze. What did it say? Runa asked. He shook his head. My mother's name. I haven't spoken it since before my first death. His face hardened, but his voice cracked faintly. It remembers even what I've forgotten. Runa placed a hand on his arm, then stepped carefully. This bridge was built from everything unspoken. It can either carry us or consume us. Together, they began to cross. The light shifted under their feet like living breath, expanding and contracting with each step. Every motion triggered a note, and every note formed a voice, a chorus of ghosts of forgotten words, of the dead calling not to be resurrected but to be heard once. Halfway across, Kelda stumbled. The sound beneath them flared, and dozens of whispers rose at once, overlapping, some pleading, others laughing, others screaming the names they had never been given. The bridge brightened violently, and cracks of gold appeared beneath their feet. "She's afraid," Egil said, gripping her shoulders. "It's reacting to her." Runa's eyes shone with comprehension. The bridge feeds on silence. It's built from it. Her fear awakens what was left unsaid. Kelda was trembling, her tears forming faint runes that flickered midair before vanishing into the hum. "They're calling me," she said, her voice small and cracking. "They want me to answer." Runa crouched beside her. "Then answer, but not with fear, with truth. Speak something you've never said before." The girl hesitated, lips quivering. Then, with a shaking breath, she whispered, "I'm not the frost. I'm what it tried to protect." The bridge steadied instantly. The hum softened into harmony. The light warm again. Egil exhaled, his immortal tension breaking for a heartbeat. "That did it," he muttered. But then he heard something else. His name, Egil, spoken not in the cold tone of memory, but with tenderness. He turned sharply toward the mist beyond the bridge, where shapes flickered, figures from his forgotten wars, comrades long gone. One lifted a hand, lips shaping words he couldn't hear, but somehow knew. "You fought long enough." He almost stepped toward them, but Runa grabbed his arm. "Don't listen too long," she warned. "The bridge gives comfort to those who dwell too much in regret. It wants to turn your silence into its foundation." He nodded, eyes wet but steady. "Then let's finish this." As they neared the far end, the voices merged into a single tone. An endless chord vibrated with the names of every soul who had ever existed but never been known. The hum grew unbearable, blurring thought, blurring self. Kelda clutched Runa's hand. Egil covered his ears, but the sound came from inside them now, from the blood's own rhythm. Runa stopped and took her harp. "It's not just a bridge," she said through the rising resonance. "It's a test. The gods demand we give something unspoken before we can pass." She looked at Egil first. "What truth have you never told?" He stared into the mist, jaw tightening. "That I wanted the war to end. That I begged to die. But glory kept me alive longer than my soul wanted." He spoke it aloud, and the hum shifted, a new frequency opening, a release. Then Runa turned to Kelda. "And you?" Kelda's eyes filled with shimmering light. "That I wanted the world to stop being quiet, even if it hurt." The bridge flared golden, almost translucent. Runa smiled faintly. "Then it's my turn." She touched the strings of her harp, each note forming a word. "That I no longer wish to serve the god silence. I want the sound to belong to us." The bridge responded. The hum rose to crescendo, then softened into a sigh. The mist parted, revealing the far shore, a realm bathed in twilight, with a sky rippled like a great heart still learning to beat. As they stepped onto the other side, the bridge behind them began to fade, thread by glowing thread, returning to the unspoken realm it came from. The last note lingered, whispering through their bones. Names once unspoken are now remembered. Runa looked back only once. The emptiness where the bridge had been shimmered with faint, golden echoes. "Every silence has a name," she said quietly. "We just gave ours away." And together, with the warrior who could not die, the child born of frost and fear, and the harpist who carried the god's last song, they walked into the land beyond sound, where memory itself was still learning to breathe. The cavern opened before them like a throat carved into the bones of the world. The air shimmered with cold iron and ancient smoke. It was not darkness that filled the halls, but a gray luminescence, as though the walls remembered fire but could no longer bear to glow. The echoes reached them first, steady, rhythmic, yet hollow. Hammer against anvil, hammer against nothing. Egil slowed, his boots crunching over gravel that glittered faintly with filings of gold. "No one's tended these forges in centuries," he said, voice low, reverent. "Then who still hammers?" Runa asked. The sound answered her. A distant clang rang out, then another, as if to say, "We do." They followed the noise deeper. Massive furnaces stood like tombs, their mouths blackened and cold. yet the air trembled with a memory of heat. Chains swayed gently from unseen drafts, and tools hung midair, turning slowly as though waiting for hands that would never return. Every surface bore the scars of labor and grief, the runic sigils of the dwarves, half buried beneath centuries of dust. Kelda's small fingers trailed along one wall. Frost bloomed where she touched, and the symbols glowed faintly in return. "They're sad," she whispered. "They don't know how to stop working." Runa nodded. They forged weapons for gods who forgot to use them wisely. When the songs of war fell silent, their hammers couldn't bear the stillness, so they forged the echoes now. Egil's brow furrowed. "Echoes! Listen," she said. He did, and heard it. The clanging was not random. Each strike carried tone and tension. It wasn't work. It was lament. The rhythm repeated like breath. 5 beats, a pause, then 3, the cadence of mourning. Kelda's eyes widened. They're trying to make something. Runa stepped forward, the hum inside her aligning with the forge's rhythm. "No," she murmured. "They're trying to finish something." At the heart of the cavern stood the greatest anvil ever forged, a slab of obsidian streaked with veins of molten gold, still warm though no fire burned beneath it. Tools moved around it on their own, hammers rising, striking, tongs shifting phantom metal none of them could see. The air quivered with unseen pressure. Egil took a step closer, and a spark leapt from the anvil to his chest plate. It hissed, leaving a rune burned into metal, Kaunin, the rune of creation through pain. He winced but did not step back. "They know I'm one of them," he said softly. "A maker of destruction." Runa placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not destruction. Transformation." The invisible hammer struck again, this time louder, harder, as though the forges themselves had heard her. The air pulsed, and suddenly the heat returned, not as flame, but as vibration. The entire hall began to hum, deep and resonant, joining the melody that had followed them since Valhalla. "The Whisper Forge," Runa said. "That's what they called it in the old sagas. A place where sound and metal were one, where the gods' first weapons were sung into being." Kelda stepped forward, her frost dissolving in the warmth. "But no one's singing now." Runa nodded grimly. "Then we must." She lifted her harp. The strings trembled as though already aware of what she intended. When she played the first note, the forges responded instantly. The tools froze midair, waiting. The sound of her harp wove to the hammer rhythm, filling the gaps in their lament. The invisible smiths listened. Egil knelt, laying his axe across the anvil. The moment the weapon touched, it glowed red, as though waking from centuries of exhaustion. He whispered, not a prayer, not a name, but surrender. "No more blood," he said. "Only memory." The forges roared to life. Fire burst from cracks in the floor, pure sound given shape. Sparks swirled like stars in orbit. Runa's melody rose higher, Kelda adding her fragile voice, a whisper that froze each spark just before it vanished, capturing their light as floating runes. The air thickened with creation, and grief intertwined. Then the unseen hammers struck one final time. The sound was so powerful, it split the silence in two. When it faded, all motion stopped. The air cooled. On the anvil lay a single object, a shard of black metal no larger than Runa's palm, etched with shifting runes that seemed to breathe. It pulsed faintly with the hum they carried. Egil reached for it, but Runa stopped him. "It's not a weapon," she said. "It's a memory, a fragment of what the dwarves never finished, a bridge between their sorrow and the god's silence." Kelda leaned close. "What do we do with it?" Runa listened, closing her eyes. The shard sang, a note so low it felt like heartbeat, so ancient it carried dust from before the first dawn. "We carry it," she said, "until the song finds its ending." The forges dimmed, their grief finally stilled. The hammers dropped one by one, no longer moving. The sound that had haunted the cavern faded into something gentler, a sigh, almost relief. As they turned to leave, Egil looked back once. The walls glowed faintly, runes flickering like embers. He bowed his head. "Rest well, brothers," he murmured. "Your work is done." Runa took the shard, wrapping it in cloth. Its warmth seeped through, steady and alive. The world is remembering itself, she said, one sound at a time. And as they stepped out of the Whisper Forge, the mountain above them exhaled a final plume of smoke, no fire, no ash, just breath, like the last sigh of the earth after too long without a song. They camped that night beneath a sky that refused to settle, half aurora, half storm. Runa couldn't sleep. The hum had grown restless since they had left the Whisper Forge. It beat behind her ribs like a second pulse, whispering in a language older than wind. When she finally closed her eyes, the world slipped sideways. She wasn't dreaming in the mortal sense. It was as if her thoughts had been pulled into another realm, a plane made of soundless light and memory. The air rippled like the surface of deep water, and through it, she saw the reflection of an eye so vast it seemed to hold the entire cosmos in its pupil. Odin's eye, the same he had traded to drink from Mimir's well, to see all that ever was and would be. The gaze turned inward, and she fell through it. Images unfolded around her, not as visions, but as harmonies given shape. The sound of the first axe cleaving bark, the breath that woke Yggdrasil, the laughter of gods before war taught them silence. Then came the fracture, the scream that was not sound but regret made audible. The world tree split, and its echoes scattered across every realm. At the center of the collapse, Odin knelt. Not the king she knew from stories, not the all-knowing father of battles, but a man stripped of myth. His hands trembled over a small fragment that was glowing faintly in the void. It pulsed in rhythm with the hum she had carried for so long. He whispered something, not command, not prayer, but confession. I sealed it away. His voice was heavy with the weight of every vow he'd broken. The echo was my sorrow, the sound of what should not have been forgotten. When I tore my eye from its place, it remembered me too well. Runa stepped closer, though no ground held her. You trapped your regret inside the last piece of the world tree, she said, her voice shaking. And now it wants to be free. Odin looked up, his one remaining eye clouded with endless winter. Regret is a forge that never cools, he murmured. The dwarves try to temper it. The ravens try to hide it. The silence tried to contain it. But grief learns to sing. As he spoke, the fragment in his hands cracked, for within spilled light and sound entwined. Every heartbeat, every whispered name, every story the gods had silenced in their pursuit of order. The hum Runa had known all her life came from this. The god sorrow turned into resonance, vibrating through the roots of the 9 worlds, seeking ears that could bear its truth. You are its answer, Odin said softly, the mortal ear that can endure what we cannot, the harp of flesh, the bridge of compassion. Runa's throat burned. And Egil and Kelda, they are chords of the same song, he replied. The death that cannot rest, the fear that freezes love. You are harmony. Together, you can unmake the silence. He reached toward her, but before she could take his hand, the fragment shattered completely. Sound erupted, not noise, but meaning. It tore through her chest, filling her with warmth and ache all at once. The void dissolved into brightness, and she felt herself pulled backward through the eye, through centuries of divine memory, until she fell gasping into her body. Egil was shaking her awake. You were gone, he said. Your eyes were open, but you weren't here. She sat up slowly, pressing a trembling hand to her heart. The hum was still there, but changed, softer, fuller. It no longer demanded. It answered. I saw him, she whispered. The echo began as Odin's regret. He buried it in the last splinter of Yggdrasil. But it grew. It became everything we hear. The sound beneath creation. It's not just sorrow. It's longing to remember. Kelda stirred by the fire, her eyes reflecting distant constellations. Then if we free it, she asked, will the gods forgive themselves? Runa looked into the dark horizon, where the aurora had begun to pulse like breathing. No, she said quietly. Forgiveness isn't what it wants. It wants to be heard. Egil nodded grimly. Then we find the fragment. The last root of the world tree, Runa said, where the silence began and where it must end. The night wind shifted, carrying with it a low, resonant note that neither came from heaven nor earth, but from in between. The hum was leading them again, toward the heart of everything forgotten, where a god's sorrow still dreamed a song. They descended through mists that clung to their ankles like memory, each step dimming the hum until it became something deeper, an ache that thrummed beneath the skin. There was no road, only suggestion, a slow downward spiral carved from stone that pulsed faintly as if alive. When at last the air grew to still breathe, they knew they had crossed into the realm of hell. The underworld was not fire or frost, but a hush made solid. The dead stood in rows along the shore of a black river, unmoving yet not lifeless, their eyes faintly glowing like embers cool but not extinguished. None spoke. None reached out. They simply listened. The sound they heard was not the wind, nor the distant churn of water. It was a hum, vast and slow, resonating to the bones of the dead, as if the world itself were breathing in reverse. Runa shivered. They were waiting for something. Hell appeared without movement, as if she had always been there, watching from the edge of silence. Her form shifted with every blink, half radiant, half ruined, her left side pale and warm, her right cold and gray as ash. Her eyes held the weight of those who had heard everything and envied none of it. "They wait," Hel said, her voice both echo and whisper, "because it is their turn to listen." The living fill the air with noise. The dead learn to hear what the gods cannot. Runa bowed her head. "We came seeking the last root of the world tree. The hum leads here." Hel stepped closer. The dead leaned forward slightly, as if drawn by her presence. "All sound returns to me in time," she said, "even the voices of gods." They thought death would muffle regret, but regret is louder in the dark. Egil's hand rested uneasily on his axe. "You say they listen, but to what?" "To the truth," Hel replied. "To themselves. To the echoes the gods built walls against." Her gaze moved to Runa. "You've heard it, haven't you?" Their silence was not peace. It was fear. They sealed their own echoes within creation, terrified of the sound that remembered their mistakes. Kelda stepped forward, small and trembling, her breath forming crystals in the air. "Then why do they keep listening?" "Because they hope someone will answer," said Hel. "The dead do not crave life. They crave completion. Each one here carries an unfinished sound, a word left unsaid, a song unsung. That is why they rise in the listening hour." As she spoke, the air began to shimmer. The dead lifted their heads in unison, and from the black river rose a faint mist that sang without voice, tones so low and tender they barely existed. The hum deepened, folding into layers of resonance that vibrated in Runa's bones. The runes on her harp flickered to life. Hel raised her hand, and the song stopped instantly. "Every age, one living ear crosses my threshold," she said. "You are that ear. The gods cannot mend what they will not face. But you can." Runa hesitated. "If I play here, what will they hear?" "Everything they buried," Hel said. "Every truth the divine drowned in myth. Every apology they fear to make. The world will not break from it, but it will remember." Egil looked at the ranks of the dead, their stillness unbearably gentle. "And if she doesn't, then the silence wins," Hel said simply. "And even my realm will forget what was for." Runa knelt by the riverbank. Her reflection shifted. Not her face, but hundreds of others overlaying hers. Warriors, mothers, children, gods. She drew her fingers across the harp strings, and sound blossomed, not loud but infinite. The notes rose and sank through the dead like wind through wheat. They swayed and their eyes softened. Hel smiled faintly. "You see? They do not rise to speak. They rise to hear." The hum intertwined with her melody, forming something neither mortal nor divine, a remembrance of every heartbeat ever silenced. The walls of the underworld trembled, and for a moment Runa thought she heard Odin's regret again, distant but listening. When the final note faded, Hel stepped forward, her face illuminated by both life and decay. "The walls weaken," she said, "but beware. Those who built them will not let them fall easily." Runa nodded. "Then we'll keep playing." Hel's expression softened. "Go. The path to the root lies beneath the last silence, the one even I cannot hear." As they turned to leave, the dead bowed their heads once more, as if in gratitude. The river glowed faintly, and for the first time a breeze moved through Hel's realm. Egil looked back, uneasy. What happens to them now? Hel's answer came like a sigh. They will keep listening. But now they know they are heard. And as Runa, Egil, and Kelda ascended toward the world above, the underworld began to hum anew. Stronger, steadier, a promise echoing upward through every layer of existence. No silence lasts forever. They camped among the roots of a mountain that had long ago lost its name. The hum had grown restless again, pressing against Runa's chest like a heartbeat too vast to belong to one body. The air trembled with low vibrations, as though the stone itself were remembering pain. That was when she knew. Her old harp could no longer hold what the world demanded of it. She dismantled it in silence, plank by plank, until only the frame remained, warped, brittle, unworthy of what came next. Egil watched her with weary patience, sharpening his axe though he had no enemy in sight. Kelda sat nearby, tracing runes in the frost, each one melting before it was finished. "What are you doing?" Egil asked at last. "Making something that can speak louder than I can," Runa said. "The hum has changed since Hel's realm. It wants form. It wants memory." He frowned. "Memory is cruel work. So is living forever," she said softly. He looked at her then, really looked, and understood. When she reached toward him, he did not move away. "It will hurt," she warned. He nodded. "Then it's honest." She took a strand of his hair, white, coarse, unbreakable, and pulled. It came free not as a simple thread, but as light, shimmering like molten silver. She tested its strength. It sang in her fingers, a sound both metallic and human, the tone of an unending heartbeat. One by one, she strung her harp with his immortal hair. Each strand hissed as it tightened, as if awakening. When she plucked the first string, the world shuddered. Sound did not travel outward. It tunneled inward. Egil gasped, his hand flying to his chest. "That!" Runa played again. This time the sound split the air, and from the space between heartbeats came a vision. A field of bodies under red clouds. Thousands of warriors frozen mid-charge, their mouths open in silent defiance. And there, among them, Egil's younger self, kneeling in mud, his blade shattered, his heart still beating though no breath came. He staggered backward. "That's my first death." Runa's hands trembled on the strings. Each chord remembers a death you could not keep. Kelda rose slowly, her eyes wide with reverence and fear. "You're not just playing music," she whispered. "You're unraveling immortality." Runa plucked again, and the notes spiraled into ground, opening cracks in the earth like veins of light. From them rose faces, each one Egil's, each from a different lifetime. The soldier who fell at sea, the wanderer lost in snow, the old man who burned his village and woke again in the ashes. Every forgotten death cried out, not in pain but in relief. He sank to his knees. "I remember them now," he said, voice breaking. "Every end I was denied. Every battle I should have left behind." Runa's eyes shimmered with tears. "They weren't taken from you. They were stored. The gods needed someone who couldn't die to carry the weight of those who could." The hum rose around them, no longer gentle but vast and resonant, echoing to the mountains like thunder that refused to fade. The harp glowed, its strings vibrating with golden fire. Each note Runa played pulled another fragment of the lost dead into the air, until the night itself seemed full of transparent lives drifting upward, souls that had been trapped in the echo, freed by the sound of Egil's memory. Kelda covered her mouth. "They're beautiful." Runa smiled faintly. "They're unfinished songs, finding their ending." Egil's face was streaked with tears that burned gold as they fell. "If this is the price of forever," he said hoarsely, "then let them all go." Runa nodded once and struck a final chord. The sound rose like fire meeting breath, and for a moment the world turned translucent. The mountain's veins glowed, the air filled with whispers, thank yous, farewells, names the gods had erased. Then, slowly the visions faded. The light withdrew into the harp, leaving it blackened but alive, humming softly in Runa's arms. She exhaled, trembling. "It's done." Egil looked at her, his eyes calmer than they had ever been. "No," he said quietly. "It's beginning." The hum agreed, resonating deep below them, as if Yggdrasil itself had stirred in its sleep. The harp of the damned was no longer just an instrument. It was a vessel of remembrance, each string a conduit between the mortal and the divine. Runa looked down at the faint glow beneath the ground. "Every sound has a root," she whispered, "and we're getting closer to it." Kelda stepped forward, touching one of the still warm strings. A shiver ran through her, and her frost bloomed across the metal. For an instant, the harp sang by itself, a single note that held both life and death, warmth and winter. Egil smiled through exhaustion. Then we followed song. Runa nodded, the hum vibrating softly against her ribs. "To the root," she said, "to where the gods buried what they feared most." Behind them, the wind carried the faintest echo of applause, not mockery, not triumph, but gratitude from the unseen dead. The mountains answered with a sigh that sounded almost like peace. The storm had no sky, no sea, only motion, sound frozen into shape. The wind screamed but made no noise. It glittered instead, a current of fractured lightning sealed in crystal arcs. Across that impossible plain sailed their vessel, a ship built from the ribs of thunder itself. Its hull was carved from echoes, the splinter remains of Mjolnir's last strike, the instant when thunder broke and never fully healed. Each plank thrummed with a different note of that explosion. The first shock of creation, the roar of rebellion, the whimper that followed victory. When Runa touched the railing, the sound pressed into her palm, electric and grieving. Egil stood at the prow, his immortal weight steadying what should not float. The wind tore through his hair, humming faintly with the same resonance that lived in his axe. "This isn't a sea," he said. "It's a storm pretending to remember one." Runa nodded, tightening the straps of her harp. "And this ship, these bones, it remembers the day Thor fell silent." Kelda clung to mast, eyes wide with wonder. "Are we inside a sound?" "Yes," Runa said, "and it's trying to remember how to end." The storm stretched forever, a frozen orchestra of motion and stillness. Bolts of lightning hung suspended in the air like silver trees, their roots buried in the horizon. When the ship passed near one, it vibrated, emitting faint tones, remnants of Mjolnir's voice. The notes trembled through the deck, blending with the hum Runa carried. "Thor's hammer wasn't just a weapon," she said softly. "It was a god's heartbeat given shape. When it broke, the sound didn't die, it scattered." Egil rested a hand on his chest. "And now we sail through his echo." As they moved deeper, the air thickened, the frozen waves rising like cathedral walls. The silence inside the storm grew unbearable. Even Runa's harp refused a sound. When she plucked a string, the note shattered midair, becoming frost. Kelda's breath misted into runes. "The sound here doesn't want to be touched," she whispered. Runa frowned. "No, it wants to be heard." She knelt on the deck, laying the harp flat. "Egil," she said, "your hair binds this harp to life. Strike it once." He hesitated, but the hum between them guided his hand. He brought the blunt of his axe down upon the frame. The vibration spread outward like a ripple through glass, and suddenly the frozen storm began to move. The shards of thunder around them shivered and cracked, releasing bursts of light and sound. Runa felt the world tilt. The ship surged forward, its sails billowing with the breath of gods. In the distance, figures appeared, massive silhouettes walking through the storm, their forms half lightning, half memory. The Aesir, or what remained of them, forged from the echoes of their own destruction. Kelda clutched Runa's arm. "Are they alive?" "Only when someone listens," Runa said. The ship creaked as the first of the figures turned its hollow gaze toward them. Thunder rolled, not in sound, but in the pressure of thought. Words formed out of vibration. Why disturb the silence? Egil stepped forward, his voice steady. Because it wasn't peace. It was exile. The storm paused, uncertain. Runa felt the hum within her align with the world's rhythm. She played a single note. It stretched across the frozen sky like a fracture, and from it came sound. Real, living, defiant. Lightning screamed to life, crashing in color and heat. The ship bucked beneath their feet, carried now by thunder that had remembered itself. The frozen storm melted into rain made of light. Runa shouted over the roaring wind. "We're not here to break it. We're here to finish the note it never got to play." Egil laughed, wild and unafraid. "Then play it." She did. Each chord of her harp struck a memory free. The laughter of God before the fall, the hammer's promise, the sky's first heartbeat. The storm surged higher, and the great figures bowed their heads, dissolving into the sound they once commanded. When it ended, the sea beneath them was no longer frozen. It shimmered like liquid lightning, calm and alive. The ship drifted forward, its hull humming in quiet triumph. Kelda touched the deck. What happens to thunder now? Runa smiled faintly. It rests, not in silence, but in memory. Above them, the clouds parted, revealing the faint outline of a bridge made of light stretching into the heavens. It pulsed gently, an invitation, a continuation. Egil placed a hand on the mast. To the root, he said. Runa nodded, to where the sound began and where it will choose whether to end. And as the ship of Thunder's bones sailed toward that impossible horizon, the world below rumbled, not with fear, but with the first true song of awakening. They found the serpent's bones half buried in the seabed, so vast that even the horizon bent around them. Ribs the size of towers curved upward like frozen crescents, bleached by centuries of current and silence. The water here was not water but resonance. Each wave rose and felt an invisible rhythm, humming low, bending light, bending time. The ship of Thunder's bones glided between those colossal remains, its hull singing softly in answer to the deep. The hum that followed them since Valhalla vibrated through every plank, finding its mirror inside the serpent's bones. The ocean itself seemed to hold its breath. Runa stood at the bow, her hair lifting slightly as though gravity no longer applied. "We're inside the place where sound goes to sleep," she murmured, "and dreams of waking." Egil scanned the ribcage, his eyes narrowing. "You mean the choir," he said, "the one sung by no mouths." Kelda touched the water, and her fingertips rippled with faint gold light. "I can feel them," she whispered. "Every wave is a voice that forgot how to be human." The hum deepened, and the sea began to move differently, rising not in crests but in shapes, almost figures made of pure vibration. They swayed like spirits caught between song and silence. The serpent's ribcage amplified them, turning the ocean into a living instrument. Runa lifted her harp and played a single, cautious note. It trembled in the air, then spread outward, echoed, multiplied. The bones of Jormungandr answered, groaning with a sound that came not from matter but memory. For a heartbeat, the world quivered with an ancient harmony, the music that once tethered the sea to the stars. But then Kelda screamed. The pitch warped, the harmony collapsing into dissonance. The ocean's light dimmed, the ribs shuddering like the breath of a dying god. Runa rushed to her side. "What happened?" Kelda's eyes were wide with terror. "It was too loud inside me," she said, clutching her chest. "Every fear I ever had started to sing back. I can't stop it." Runa held her shoulders, steadying her. "Listen to me. Fear is in silence. It's sound unshaped. You can mold it." The child shook her head. "No, it freezes me." Egil knelt beside them. "Then melt it," he said simply, "like ice to water. Let it flow. That's how storms become songs." Runa nodded, guiding Kelda's hands toward the harp. "You remember what Hel told us? The dead listen because they've learned to stop fearing what they hear. Now it's your turn." Kelda hesitated, tears glimmering like tiny runes on her cheeks. She pressed one trembling hand to the strings. At first, only static came, a sharp hiss, the noise of panic. Then she took a breath, and her next touch produced a tone so pure it silenced even the sea. The serpent's ribs began to glow, each one lighting up in sequence, forming an enormous cathedral of sound beneath the waves. The choir had awakened. The figures within the water swayed closer, no longer chaotic but rhythmic, their voices blending with Kelda's trembling melody. The fear inside her melted, transforming into resonance. For the first time, she wasn't fighting the sound. She was part of it. The music grew stronger. The ribs of Jormungandr pulsed like strings on a cosmic instrument. The entire ocean bent around them, every current shaped by harmony. The ship of Thunder's bones rose with the tide, held aloft by sound alone. Egil looked up in awe. She's singing to see itself back into order. Runa smiled through tears. "No, She's teaching it how to forgive." The choir's song deepened, and through it they heard echoes of the serpent's own voice, the ancient creature that had circled the world, holding chaos at bay. Its song was not rage or hunger, but duty, the endless, lonely hum of keeping existence in rhythm. Kelda's voice merged with it, small but luminous. Her fear dissolved completely, replaced by calm so bright it felt sacred. The waves shimmered gold, and the hum that had haunted them since Valhalla at last sounded whole, balanced, breathing, complete. Then, as quickly as it had risen, the choir faded. The sea settled, the ribs quieted, and silence returned, but not the suffocating kind. This was peace, earned and shared. Runa embraced the girl, feeling her heartbeat steady. "You did it," she whispered. "You turned your fear into music." Kelda smiled faintly. "It wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the world." Egil looked toward the far horizon, where the water met the trembling light of dawn. Then the world just remembered something the gods forgot. The ship drifted onward, leaving the serpent's rib cage glowing softly behind them. In the still water, the reflection of the three travelers shimmered, warrior, harpist, and child, woven together by a harmony that would outlast both gods and death. And somewhere deep below, beneath the last echo of the sea, the bones of Jormungandr sighed in contentment, carrying the whisper of their song to the roots of the world tree, where all sound waits to begin again. They entered the valley at dusk, when the sun bled gold through the mist and every shadow looked like a secret trying to speak. The hum that had guided them for so long went quiet at the first ridge, as if unwilling to follow. The stillness that replaced it was unlike any silence they had known. It wasn't absence, but pressure, a silence that pushed back. The valley stretched below them, vast and symmetrical, a field of metal frozen mid-battle. Thousands of shields sit upright in the soil, row upon perfect row, their surfaces dull but alive with faint motion, breathing, flexing, as though remembering what they were made for. No rust, no decay, only stillness. Egil stopped walking first. "I know this place," he said. His voice came out muffled, swallow before it could travel. "This is where sound dies." Runa tested the air with a note from her harp. The tone left the string, then collapsed instantly, vanishing into the distance like breath against stone. "They're drinking it," she whispered. "Every vibration, every word." Kelda's eyes widened. "But why?" "To keep something from waking," Runa said. They moved between the rows, their footsteps deadened by the ground. Each shield bore marks of war, scratches, burns, dents, but there was no sign of corpses, no weapons, no bones. The valley felt like a battlefield that had exhaled once and never inhaled again. Egil brushed his fingers over one of the shields. The metal was cold, pulsing faintly beneath his skin, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. "They were forged to protect the gods," he murmured. "But they learned to protect the silence instead." Runa approached another. It reflected nothing, no face, no sky, no light. Her own outline vanished when she stood before it. Something inside her tightened. "They're not reflecting," she said. "They're listening." Kelda stepped closer to the smaller one, its edge buried deep in the soil. "It's humming," she said softly, like it wants to say something. Runa hesitated only a moment before plucking the edge of one shield like a string. The valley convulsed. The sound that came out wasn't music. It was agony made audible, the collective scream of every war that had ever ended in silence. It ripped through the air, sharp enough to shake the horizon. The other shields trembled, resonating in sympathy. Waves of raw vibration rolled across the plain, bending the mist into spirals. Egil grabbed Runa's arm, dragging her back. "Stop!" he shouted, but even his roar fractured midair, devoured by the noise. Kelda fell to her knees, covering her ears. "It hurts," it remembers. And it did. The scream wasn't anger. It was grief. It carried the voices of soldiers, gods, beasts, all those whose last sound had been trapped here when the shields drank them. The valley was an archive of endings, and Runa had just opened it. She dropped her harp and pressed her hands to the ground. "Enough," she whispered. "Enough. I hear you." The noise began to break apart, splintering into smaller tones, each one shaped like a name. They rose into the air as ribbons of sound, drifting upward before fading into silence again. Egil exhaled shakily. You woke them? No, Runa said, trembling. I listened. The nearest shield cracked down the center. From its core spilled a faint shimmer of light, like a candle seen through tears. It whispered as it faded, and though the words were almost too faint, Runa caught them. We guarded what we feared, until fear became our god. She turned to the others. They weren't made to silence, she said. They were made to protect a secret. When the gods lost faith in sound, they hid their regrets here. Every shield holds one. Egil stared out over the valley. 1,000 regrets. Kelda stood slowly, her small hand trembling as she reached for a cracked shield. It no longer absorbed noise. When her fingers brushed its rim, it sighed softly, like wind through autumn leaves. What happens if we free them all? She asked. Runa's eyes glinted with both dread and wonder. Then the gods will have to hear themselves again. She plucked the shield once more, gently this time. Instead of a scream, a chord rang out, soft, human, almost kind. The other shields resonated, one after another, until the valley shimmered with sound too pure to bear, the sound of memory forgiving itself. The ground warmed, the mist lifted, and for a single fleeting heartbeat, the silence that had ruled this place for eons turned into music, vast and weightless, carrying upward like dawn breaking inside the soul of the earth. When it faded, the valley was quiet again, but not oppressive. The silence that remained was alive, listening, ready to answer when called. Runa retrieved her harp, her hands still trembling. It's changing, she said. The world's learning to echo again. Egil looked at the endless field of shields, each one faintly glowing from within. Then let it echo, he said. Kelda smiled faintly. This time it won't scream. And as they left the valley behind, a faint tone followed them, a single, gentle note, carried on a breeze that had finally remembered its own sound. The mead hall stood where no road led, half in the world of men, half in the thin air that separates memory from dream. Its roof shimmered with runes that flickered like embers, and the wind around it smelled of pine and iron. As Runa, Egil, and Kelda approached, faint laughter drifted from within, warm at first, then hollow, as though the joy had forgotten its source. The great doors opened without touch. Inside, 1,000 warriors sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces glimmering like reflections in a disturbed pond. They raised cups carved from bone, but what they drank was not mead, it was remembrance. The liquid shone like molten gold, but when it passed their lips, their eyes dimmed, as if every swallow stripped them of something precious. This is Valhalla's ghost, Runa murmured, a feast that never ended, even when the gods stopped attending. Egil's gaze swept across the room, his jaw tightening. No, he said quietly. This is what's left when glory rots. The spirits turned as one, eyes hollow but aware. Their movements were soundless, mouths opening, cups clinking, laughter rising in pantomime. Then came the hum, low, rolling through the hall like thunder from beneath the floorboards. It wasn't the hum that had guided them before. It was deeper, fractured, yearning for something it could no longer name. Runa's harp vibrated softly on her back. They're drinking to remember, she said. Hel's words echoed in her mind. The dead do not crave life. They crave completion. Egil walked forward, his boots silent on the stone. As he passed the tables, the warriors' faces flickered. Shadows of battles, fragments of names. Some reached for him as he moved, but their hands passed through him like cold smoke. At the far end of the hall stood a single throne, empty but radiant, its arms carved with runes that pulsed faintly when Egil approached. He stopped before it, breathing hard. I know this place, he said. I've been here before. Runa frowned. Valhalla, he shook his head slowly. No, the night I was offered it. The air shifted, and the walls began to hum with his memory. He saw it then, as clearly as the day it happened. The battlefield buried in snow, the smell of iron and ice. He had been dying, his chest crushed, his blood steaming on the frost. Above him, the sky had split, and a Valkyrie descended in a halo of light. Her hand was outstretched. Come, she had said, voice soft as the edge of thunder. The All-Father waits. But Egil had looked back, at the fallen men, The smoldering ruin, the boy who had died clutching his father's sword. Something inside him had broken. He'd refused. "I told her no," he whispered now. "I told her the gods had enough feasts. Let them drink their own courage for once." The memory solidified. The Valkyrie's expression, once divine, had turned to sorrow. "Then you'll walk without rest," she'd said, "until sound itself ends." And so he had, century after century, death without dying, voice without echo. The hall responded to his confession. The warriors froze, their cups halfway raised. One by one, they lowered them and began to weep, not from pain, but relief. The golden drink in their vessels dimmed, thickened, and evaporated into thin light. Runa stepped beside him, her voice a whisper. They'd been waiting for someone to refuse again. Egil looked at his hands, at the faint glow that still lingered in his veins. "Odin's feast runs on memory," he said. "If we stop drinking, the hall goes hungry." Kelda approached, her small face solemn. "Then we let it starve," she said. Runa plucked a string on her harp. One long, clear note that cut through the heavy air. The walls trembled. The runes on the throne flickered, then cracked, their light spilling out in slow waves. The warriors stood and lifted their cups one last time, not to Odin, but to each other. Then they raised them toward Egil. He nodded once, tears of molten gold rolling down his cheeks. "For every battle we fought," he said, "and every one we shouldn't have." He raised his hand, and the hall erupted, not in sound, but in light. The golden mead dissolved into mist, spreading through the rafters like dawn. The laughter that followed was different now, unbound, weightless, free. When it faded, the hall was empty. Only the tables remained, and the faint hum of peace settling into wood. Runa touched Egil's arm. "You ended the feast." He shook his head. "No, I just stopped eating." The hum beneath the floor softened, merging with the rhythm in Runa's chest. The pulse of the harp, the heartbeat of the world relearning its sound. Kelda watched the last motes of gold rise through the ceiling and vanish into the night. "Where do they go now?" she asked. Runa smiled faintly. "Where sound goes when it's forgiven." They stepped out into the cold air. The sky above them was quiet, yet alive, the kind of silence that listens. And as they walked away from the ruins of the endless feast, the hum that had haunted them for so long began, for the first time, to sound like a song. It began as a hairline fracture in the heavens, too faint for the eye, but the world heard it. A crack that was not thunder, not wind, but the slow exhalation of something waking after an age of pretending to sleep. The stars quivered. The clouds held their breath. The hum that carried Runa, Egil, and Kelda across realms faltered, then surged with sudden purpose, as though drawn toward an unseen source. They stood on a plateau of polished stone, the remnants of some ancient altar long eroded by time and divine neglect. Above them, the sky looked bruised, threaded with pale light that leaked from its wound. The air itself hummed like a vast string pulled too tight. Runa felt the sound before she saw it, the voice moving through the crack, not spoken but remembered by the world. It was heavy, layered, each syllable older than language. The first lie, the voice said, was silence. The sound broke over them like a wave. Egil staggered, gripping his axe for balance. Kelda pressed her hands to her ears, though the words came from inside the bones, not the air. Runa stood still, trembling. She knew that voice. She had heard its echo in every hum, every chord, every breath of the god's regret. "Odin," she whispered. The sky shuddered again, the fracture widening into a trembling seam of light. Within it, not a face but an eye appeared, vast, weary, and bright with sorrow too large to measure. Around it, the faint shape of the All-Father's outline flickered like a mirage, half dream, half memory. Runa stepped forward. "You remember us." "I remember everything," the voice replied, its timbre both thunder and whisper. "And I remember why I chose to forget." Egil's voice was low, reverent, but edged with defiance. "You made the world deaf to its own heart. You silenced your own echoes." Odin's gaze flickered toward him. "You refused me once, Berserker, and yet you walk still, carrying the death of thousands who were meant to rest. Do not pretend you know mercy better than I. Egil bowed his head, but did not flinch. I know guilt. That's closer. A pause. Then, softer, Odin's voice cracked. Do you think I do not? The sky rippled, the light dimming to a mournful pulse. Images formed in the fracture. The forging of Mjolnir, the laughter of the first feast, the flames that devoured the last. Runa saw the moment the All-Father looked upon the ruin of his own making, the wars he sanctioned, the worship that twisted into fear, and chose not to hear any more. He had turned his ear from the world, and in doing so, from himself. The echo was never vengeance, Runa said. It was your sorrow, trapped in the roots of Yggdrasil. You hid it, so no one could name it. Odin's voice trembled like the low string of a dying harp. And you would release it? Let the world drown in its own remembering. Runa's fingers brushed her harp. The strings glowed faintly, forged of Egil's immortal hair, tempered by the tears of gods and men. Not drown, she said. Sing. The air brightened, the hum swelling around them, a vibration that pulled at everything living. Odin's eye closed briefly, then opened again, less fierce now, more human. I dreamed once that mortals would learn to listen without needing my voice. I made them in silence, hoping they'd find their own song. But you fear what they'd sing, Runa said. The sky cracked wider. From a fissure fell flakes of light that burned into the earth, each one carrying the resonance of a forgotten word. Around them, the plateau began to vibrate, every stone remembering what it had once been part of, the sound of the world's first heartbeat. The silence was meant to protect creation, Odin said. Instead, it caged it. Runa lifted her harp. Then let's open the cage. Egil stepped beside her, nodding once. Let him hear what he tried to forget. Kelda's small hand tightened on Runa's cloak. He's afraid, she said softly. He's afraid to be forgiven. Runa plucked the first string. The sound rose clean and luminous, resonating with the hum that lived in the sky itself. The light in the fracture responded, flickering like breath. She played again, one note for the gods, one for the dead, one for every mortal voice that had ever been silenced by fear. The sound did not echo. It expanded, wrapping around the horizon, through the cracks, into the trembling heavens. Odin's voice followed, breaking apart as if his words were being carried away piece by piece. If sound remembers me, he whispered, let it also forget. Runa shook her head. It doesn't forget. It transforms. The light in the sky grew unbearable, and then, quietly, everything stilled. The hum did not stop. It changed. It became the low, steady rhythm of breathing. The world exhaling, the gods releasing, the silence at last turning to song. When the light faded, the crack in the sky had closed. Only a faint shimmer remained, a scar across the clouds that pulsed faintly, like the afterimage of music. Egil stared upward. Did we free him? Runa answered without looking away. We reminded him. The gods were never meant to rule the sound. They were meant to join it. Kelda leaned against her side, her voice a whisper. Then what happens now? Runa smiled faintly, tears glinting like starlight. Now the world listens back. And somewhere above, beyond the healed sky, the echo of Odin's last breath lingered, soft, tired, almost tender, murmuring to the endless hum he had once feared to hear. May every silence become a song. The wind changed when she spoke her vow. It carried no thunder, no omen, only stillness, the kind that settles over a battlefield after every blade has fallen silent. Runa stood atop the plateau where Odin's voice had cracked the sky, her harp slung across her back, her eyes fierce with purpose. Egil and Kelda watched from below, knowing that what she intended would not pass quietly through the realms. I will wake Valhalla, she said, the words trembling the air around her. Not to march, not to kill, but to speak. The hum that had guided them for so long vibrated like a heartbeat on the verge of panic. The wind hissed through unseen runes, carrying whispers that might have been warning or applause. Egil frowned, his immortal jaw set. You mean to challenge a god with their own echoes? No, she said, looking beyond him to the horizon. I mean to remind them what the echo was for. Kelda's small voice was soft but sure. They'll call it blasphemy. Runa smiled faintly. Then let them remember what truth sounds like when it refuses to kneel. The air darkened. From the west came a shimmer, like heat over sand, except cold. The sky began to fracture, not with lightning, but with presence. Silhouettes formed in the clouds. Freya's calm fury, Thor's forgotten laughter, Tyr's handless judgment. The pantheon gathered, their forms woven amidst memory and divine unease. Freya spoke first, her voice velvet and edged with steel. You would wake the hall that sleeps for peace? You would undo what the All-Father sealed. Yes, Runa said. You built Valhalla to glorify noise, the noise of conquest, of pride, of grief disguised as honor. But its silence now is the only thing in all the realms that still tells the truth. Thor's shadow leaned forward, the outline of his hammer pulsing faintly. And what truth is that, mortal? That silence was never peace, she said. It was fear. The sky rumbled. A ripple of discomfort moved through the divine forms. Freya's gaze softened, only slightly. You speak like one who's forgotten her place. Runa lifted her harp. I never had one. I was made to listen. Egil stepped beside her, his hand on the haft of his axe. If she is to stand trial, then so will I. The gods can judge me for what I refuse long, before they judge her for what she dares. Kelda moved forward too, her frostlight eyes unwavering. And me, I learned from fear, not from them. Runa looked at them both and smiled, tired, grateful, unbreakable. The gods descended then, their light filling the sky until the world seemed to pulse with divine warning. Odin's voice, faint but unmistakable, echoed from the horizon. Runa of Midgard, harp of the echo, do you claim to speak for mortals? I claim nothing, she said. I answer, you left your echoes to wither in the dark. I am only giving them back their voice. The air quaked. The sky turned white. Behind her, the earth cracked open to reveal the faint outline of Valhalla, half buried beneath centuries of myth. A great hall of light and dust, its golden rafters tarnished, its doors sealed by silence itself. The gods recoiled from the sight. Thor's hammer dissolved into sparks. Freya's eyes dimmed with grief. It still dreams, she whispered. Yes, said Runa, and I will wake it, not to feed the old fire, but to show it what remains when fire becomes ash. Odin's voice deepened, heavy with the weight of inevitability. If you wake it, there will be no turning back. The living and the dead will share one song. You will end what we began. Runa closed her eyes. Then let the world end in truth, not in fear. The hum rose. Her harp glowed, each string burning with memory. The voice of hell's dead, the roar of thunder's bones, the whisper of Odin's regret. She plucked a single note, and it struck the air like a heartbeat rediscovering itself. The sealed doors of Valhalla trembled. Dust fell from the carvings. The sound spread outward, through the branches of Yggdrasil, through the serpent's ribs beneath the sea, through every silence that had once been worship. The gods flinched as if the sound had teeth. Egil shouted above the rising resonance, What happens if it wakes? Runa's hair whipped around her in the wind. Then maybe we'll hear the world tell its own story for the first time. The clouds twisted, divine forms splintering into light and shadow. Odin's voice cracked the horizon once more. Runa the hum, beware. The truth, once spoken, cannot serve. She plucked another string. Then let it rain. The sound that followed was too large for the sky, too old for words. It tore through the heavens, unraveling centuries of divine silence. Valhalla's gates began to open, not for war, not for glory, but for reckoning. The gods looked on in horror and awe, their power dimming before the raw music of truth. The hum no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the world. And Runa, standing in the heart of the storm, raised her harp to the heavens and vowed once more, Let every lie become a sound, and every silence tell its name. Lightning bloomed without thunder. The hall stirred. And for the first time since the dawn of gods, Valhalla began to listen. It began as a pulse beneath the soles of their feet, a tremor so low it was more felt than heard, like the world remembering the concept of heartbeat. The air quivered, the wind stiffened, and the sky drew in a long, shuddering breath. Runa lowered her harp, and the hum she had summoned no longer belonged to her. It had outgrown her hands. It had outgrown the gods. Across the 9 realms, sound awakened. In the high peaks of Jotunheim, mountains stirred in their sleep, dust cascading down their flanks as if they were shaking off centuries of frost and resentment. Stone split open with the sigh of ancient lungs, and the giants within them murmured in voices older than thunder. Each word vibrated through the bedrock, traveling outward like veins of fire beneath the snow. In the deep oceans of Midgard, waves convulsed and steadied, rediscovering the rhythm that had once linked them to the stars. Tides rose and fell not from moon or wind, but from memory. The drowned ruins of forgotten ages echoed with songs that no human tongue had ever shaped, yet every heart could feel. The sea, which had kept the gods' secrets longer than any living thing, began to hum them back in blue light and pulse. In Alfheim, the light itself began to shimmer with cadence, each ray bending to a rhythm unseen. Trees swayed without breeze, their leaves chiming like glass. The elves fell to their knees, their laughter and tears indistinguishable, as they heard the echo in its true form, neither song nor noise, but truth moving through matter. In Nibelheim, the frost cracked like crystal struck by a hammer. The dead stirred again, not to rise, but to listen. They pressed spectral hands to the ground and mouthed the same word, over and over, though no sound came. Home. And in Asgard, once the navel of creation, now trembling under its own myths, the gods clutched their temples and their relics, unable to silence a hum that came from the very air they ruled. The walls of their palaces quivered with the memory of laughter, of promise, of fear. Freya wept, though her tears turned to light before they could fall. Thor's shadow wavered on the storm clouds, his hammerless hand shaking as the wind around him found rhythm again. Even Odin, seated in what remained of his hall, felt his heart synchronized with the tremor. He tried to speak, but for the first time in eternity, the world spoke louder than he. Back on the plateau, Runa, Egil, and Kelda stood amid the rising resonance. The land beneath them pulsed like a drum. The air grew thick, the horizon bright. Runa could see the vibrations as light now, lines of gold and azure tracing through the air, connecting everything living and unliving, divine and mortal. The echo had become thunder, yes, but it was conscious thunder. It wasn't destroying, it was remembering. Kelda clutched Runa's cloak, eyes wide. "It's singing in everything," she said, "even the stones." Egil tilted his face toward the sky, eyes wet and unblinking. "That's not a song," he murmured. "That's the universe catching its breath." Runa's fingers tightened around her harp. The strings burned faintly, the immortal hair vibrating on its own. "This is what truth sounds like when it stops apologizing," she said. The tremor deepened, stretching through Yggdrasil's roots. The world tree itself shivered, leaves raining light, its bark splitting to reveal veins of sound instead of sap. Each branch hummed with a different pitch, each realm a note in the divine chord. Then, for a moment that defied every law of existence, all things aligned. The mountains breathed, the seas exhaled, the skies pulsed. Every heart, mortal and divine, struck the same beat. The hum rose until the world was nothing but sound, pure, luminous, immense. Then it stopped, not faded, not ended, stopped. The silence that followed was alive, vast and waiting. Runa dropped to her knees, chest heaving. Kelda was crying quietly, not from fear this time, but awe. Egil stood motionless, his immortal frame trembling. "What now?" he asked softly. Runa looked up. The sky no longer had color. It shimmered like a held breath. "Now," she said, "the world decides whether to sing again." The wind answered first, a low, gentle exhale across the plains, the kind of sound that doesn't need words. The gods didn't speak. They listened, and somewhere in the branches of Yggdrasil, where the echo first took root, a voice older than creation whispered to itself, neither in defiance nor surrender, but in recognition. Everything that ever lived was just sound learning how to become silence, and silence learning how to live again. The heavens were falling, not like stones or stars, but like memories unfastened, rivers of light breaking their banks across the sky. The hum that had once united the 9 realms now trembled at the edge of collapse, a harmony too vast to sustain itself. The mountains Runa had awakened began to sway. The seas she had taught to breathe surged upward in towers of glowing water. Valhalla stood open behind them, radiant and shaking, its columns of gold turning to dust. The sky fractured into sheets of thunder. Through it all, Runa kept playing, her harp now half broken, her fingers bleeding light instead of blood. Each note she struck held the world together for another heartbeat. But the heavens had decided to listen too closely. They leaned in, and the pressure tore at everything. Egil saw it first, the fracture of the sky collapsing above her. He didn't think. He had never needed to. He stepped between her and the falling light. The moment his immortal body met the storm, the air turned molten with sound. Runa screamed his name. He looked back at her, his face illuminated by the burning sky. "You said the world needed truth," he said softly, almost amused. "Then let mine be simple. I was never meant to live forever." The light struck. It wasn't fire or lightning. It was sound condensed, the weight of every word ever unspoken. It hit him square in the chest. The impact sent shock waves rippling through the air, freezing every note of Runa's song mid-vibration. For an instant, he stood unharmed, Egil the Unending, the man who had refused Odin, the warrior who had forgotten his deaths. Then the light passed through him, and his immortal frame began to unravel. Not in agony, but in release. The sound that had kept him alive for centuries poured out at him in golden threads, each one a memory, each one a heartbeat returning to the world. He remembered the first death, the snow, the broken blade, the Valkyrie's hand reaching through the storm, the refusal. Now he saw the truth in it. He hadn't defied the gods out of pride. He had stayed because someone, someday, would need him to stand between heaven and the fragile thing called hope. He smiled, a small human smile, heavy with peace. The heavens struck again, and Egil shattered like a cord breaking into silence. The sound of his passing rippled outward, weaving through the collapsing sky, tempering its fury. The storm softened. The mountains steadied their breathing. The seas remembered restraint. Runa dropped to her knees where he had stood, the air still hot from his presence. His axe lay before her, smoking faintly. She touched its haft, and it pulsed once, warm, grateful, and then fell still. Kelda pressed her small hand to Runa's back, whispering through her tears. He smiled. Runa nodded, unable to speak. Around them, the light began to settle, the heavens stitching themselves close with threads of sound finer than dawn. The hum returned, lower now, gentler, as if mourning. "His song isn't gone," Runa whispered at last. "It's woven into the tremor. He's part of the rhythm now." Above them, thunder rolled once, not in rage, but in salute. Valhalla's gates gleamed brighter for a moment, then dimmed, their silence no longer oppressive but sacred. The sky healed. The harp fell quiet. The echo, reborn through sacrifice, settled into the heart of the world, carried with the memory of a warrior who finally found peace by choosing to die twice, once for defiance and once for love. And in that hush, just before the heavens closed completely, a single phrase drifted through the air, faint, familiar, and smiling. "Tell the gods," I finally heard the song. The night after the heavens sealed themselves, the world seemed to exhale. No thunder, no tremor, only the long hush of something immense that had finally finished speaking. The air still shimmered faintly, filled with the taste of iron and ozone. Valhalla's silhouette lingered in the distance, like a heartbeat pause between beats. Runa sat where Egil had fallen. His axe lay across her knees, its surface dulled and warm, its hum now part of the wind. She did not play. The harp beside her was silent, its strings still glowing faintly from the song that had changed everything. She could not bear to touch it. The tears came quietly. They weren't grief alone. They were resonance, liquid light spilling down her cheeks. Each one fell with a tiny chime, freezing midair before reaching the earth. The world listened. Even silence dared not interrupt. Kelda approached carefully, her small feet stirring frost that bloomed in her wake. Her eyes reflected the aurora, the same colors that had once burned above Jormungandr's ribs. She knelt before Runa and cupped her hands beneath the falling tears. Each droplet crystallized instantly into a shard of pale blue glass that glowed from within, humming faintly. "They don't melt," the girl whispered. "They're trying to say something." Runa lifted her head, her face streaked with light. "They're only sorrow, little one." Kelda shook her head, her breath curling in the cold. "No, they're sound. I can feel it." She closed her hands around one of the frozen tears. The frost spread up her arms, not painfully, but gently, as if the world itself had chosen to trust her. The hum that had long haunted them all gathered within her palms, spinning faster, compressing into form. The shard began to twist, edges folding on themselves, light bending inward until the shape resolved. It was a key, small, intricate, made entirely of frozen resonance, transparent yet alive, vibrating with a tone that felt familiar and eternal. The sound it made was not mechanical but emotional, the quiet note that exists between heartbreak and hope. Runa stared, all cutting through her grief. "What have you done?" Kelda smiled faintly, the frost in her hair catching the dim light. "I didn't make it. You did. I only helped it remember what it wanted to be." She placed the key in Runa's hand. The moment the harpist touched it, a soft chord rang out, not from the air, but from deep within the earth. Yggdrasil stirred. Its roots, unseen but everywhere, vibrated, sending faint ripples of sound through soil, stone, and soul alike. Runa gasped as a vision struck her, the heart of the world tree, vast and glowing, hidden in the core of everything that lives. It beat like a drum made of all existence, pulsing with the first sound ever uttered, the original hum, the song of being, and it was locked. "This key," she murmured. "It's the tone that opens Yggdrasil's heart." Kelda nodded. "It's made for what you couldn't say. That's why it works." Runa clutched the key, her tears freezing again, not from pain this time, but from purpose. Egil's sacrifice, Odin's confession, the serpent's choir, the god's fear, all of it had led to this moment. The hum wanted to be whole again. She looked toward the horizon, where the trunk of the world tree shimmered faintly across the sky like an aurora. "If we open it," she said softly, "there will be no walls left between sound and silence. The gods will hear the truth they buried, and so will we." Kelda smiled, small and luminous. "That's the point." Runa rose, the key glowing in her hand. The air responded, bending subtly around her presence. The hum steadied, resonating to the harp, through the axe, through the ground beneath their feet. For the first time since Echo began, everything, gods, mortals, and the dead alike, listened without fear. Runa turned to Kelda. "Then let's go wake the heart of the world." The child took her hand. Frost and fire met, and for an instant sound and silence became one. Above them, the stars vibrated in unison, each a note, each alive. And from deep within Yggdrasil, the oldest heartbeat in existence stirred, waiting for the key made of tears to find its lock. They reached it at dawn, or what passed for dawn in a world whose sky had forgotten time. The air shimmered like breath on glass. The earth glowed faintly beneath their feet. Ahead, stretching beyond sight or reason, rose the trunk of Yggdrasil, the world tree, older than memory, older than the silence that once caged it. Its bark was the color of deep ocean, streaked with veins of gold that pulsed like slow lightning. The hum was everywhere now, gentle but vast, alive in every root, every leaf, every particle of air. Runa felt it before she saw it. The sound wasn't around her anymore. It was inside her, woven through her pulse, her breath, her very name. Yggdrasil was singing, and the song was not creation or victory. It was a lament turned into forgiveness. Kelda stepped forward, her frostlight flickering across the bark. "It's warm," she whispered, "like it's breathing." "It is breathing," Runa said softly. "Every branch, every root, every realm, it's all part of its body. We just never listened long enough to hear the lungs of the world." Egil's absence pressed at her heart like a missing chord. His axe, now slung across her back, pulsed faintly in rhythm with the tree. Somewhere inside the sound, she could feel him, steady, patient, part of the song. They reached the base of Yggdrasil, where the roots coiled like sleeping dragons. At its center was a hollow that glowed with shifting light, green, blue, gold, like sunlight seen through water. The air around it bent, vibrating with a resonance too pure to be mortal. Runa lifted the key Kelda had forged from her tears. It shimmered faintly, dripping a slow trail of frost and melody. The tree's hum deepened as she approached, each vibration carrying meaning. It was language without words, memory without pain. Kelda placed her small hand over Runa's. "It's ready," she said. When the key touched the heartwood, the sound stopped. For one suspended instant, the world held its breath. Then the hum returned, not as a single note, but as a symphony. Yggdrasil sang. The vibration rolled through every branch, through every realm, through every soul that had ever been. It reached the ruins of Valhalla, where golden shields began to resonate softly, harmonizing with the tree. It swept across the seas, which answered in deep blue thunder. It reached Hell's realm, and the dead lifted their heads, smiling faintly as the silence they had guarded for so long finally spoke. The song was not gentle. It was raw, immense, filled with every truth the gods had buried under worship and war. The trees sang of what they had refused to hear, the pain of their creations, the laughter they had silenced, the echo of Egil's first death and his second, the sorrow of Odin's eye, the frozen prayer in Kelda's heart, and the mortal courage that had dared to play music in a universe too afraid of its own voice. Runa fell to her knees, tears streaking down her face, glowing like threads of sound. The harp on her back began to vibrate wildly, its strings playing themselves, forming chords she had never learned but somehow knew. The melody was both birth and ending. Kelda stood beside her, arms outstretched, the frost from her palms scattering into light. Her fear was gone, only wonder remained. She whispered, "It's telling us everything." The bark before them split, not in destruction but revelation. Inside the tree, veins of light coiled upward like rivers. Each pulse carried visions, of worlds forming and fading, of stars learning to hum, of mortals crafting music without knowing they were echoing the heartbeat of creation itself. Runa reached out, placing her hand upon the living wood. The vibration traveled through her arm, into her chest, through the hollow where grief had once lived. She saw the gods standing across the realms, listening, weeping. Freya kneeling in a field of reborn flowers, Thor closing his eyes and feeling thunder's rhythm again. Odin, silent, humbled, his one remaining eye bright with understanding. The tree's voice deepened, merging with Runa's own. She felt herself dissolve, not vanish, but expand, her song no longer separate from the world's. For the first time, she understood, the hum had never been the gods calling to her. It had been the world asking to be remembered, and now it was. As the song reached its final crescendo, the air filled with radiant mist, sound made visible. Yggdrasil's branches stretched into infinity, each leaf vibrating with its own truth, its own small story. Every being, living or dead, divine or forgotten, had a note in the harmony. Then the music softened. The trees glowed dim to a gentle pulse. The song did not end. It became background, the rhythm of existence itself. Runa stood slowly, the key still humming faintly in her hand. "It's open," she whispered. "The heart is open." Kelda smiled through tears of light. Then maybe the world can start again. Above them, Yggdrasil's crown shimmered. From its highest branches, where the stars once hung silent, came a final echo, soft as breath, vast as eternity. Every silence was a seed. You were the song that helped it bloom. And as the first dawn rose over all 9 realms, the tree that once only stood began to hum forever, its music the heartbeat of truth, carrying the memory of everything that dared to be heard. At first, it was only vibration, a tremor too soft to name, radiating from the heart of Yggdrasil, where Runa's hand still rested. The sound no longer sought direction. It knew itself. The tree's hum folded inward, condensing, becoming not louder but clearer, pure intention given rhythm. The glow at the center deepened, and every living thing in every realm felt it. An ache behind the ribs, a warmth behind the eyes, the instant before comprehension. Then came the voice, not heard, not spoken, but understood. It did not belong to Runa or to any god. It was a voice of the echo itself, discovering language for first time. I am not born, it said. I am what remains when sound learns to listen. The words rippled outward, turning the light of Yggdrasil into movement. From the resonance rose a shape, formless at first, a swirl of breath and shimmer, then gathering itself into something almost human. Not flesh, not divine flame, but a being woven entirely from harmony, its outline translucent like dawn through mist. Where a heart might be, there pulsed a sphere of pure vibration, spinning slowly, glowing with the color of thought. Kelda clung to Runa's arm, eyes wide. Is it another god? Runa shook her head, her tears still glowing faintly. No, it's what comes after gods. The being opened its eyes, two prisms of still light, reflecting not what it saw but what saw it. Every realm felt their own reflection in that gaze. In Jotunheim, giants fell silent and lowered their weapons. In Alfheim, the light beings bowed, their luminous hands pressed to their hearts. In Asgard, even Odin, scarred by his regrets, lifted his face toward the tree and felt a rather than authority. Egil's axe, still resting beside Runa, vibrated gently, as if greeting the presence that had grown from his final act. The being's voice came again, weaving to the hum like melody through wind. You sought truth, it said. You woke silence, freed sound, bled for remembrance. Now truth must learn to listen back. Its presence expanded not upward, but inward, filling the spaces between thoughts. The air quivered with meanings that needed no words, understanding flowing like light through root and stone. In Hell's realm, the dead heard the living's grief and forgave it. In the seas, the waves learned to rise and fall in balance with the wind. Even in Asgard's halls, the gods felt their pride loosen, replaced by something foreign to them, humility. Kelda stepped forward, frost melting from her hands. What are you called? She asked softly. The being smiled, not a curve of lips, but a softening of existence. Names belong to stories that end, it said. I am what stories become when they start to listen to one another. Runa bowed her head. Then you are the echo god, she whispered. Not the sound, but the meaning behind it. The being inclined its head in acknowledgement. I am what your songs were teaching the world to remember. That understanding is the final music. Light spread from its form, climbing Yggdrasil's branches, flowing through every leaf until the entire tree shimmered like a harp strung with stars. The realms below stirred in unison. Mountains breathed, rivers harmonized. Even the winds changed pitch as if tuning themselves to the new presence. The echo god reached out, not with a hand, but with awareness, and touched Runa's harp. The immortal strings resonated one final time, bending their tone into a single, infinite note. The sound spiraled upward, dissolving into radiance, and when it faded, Runa realized the harp had vanished. Where did it go? Kelda whispered. Runa smiled softly. Everywhere. The echo god's light pulsed, its words folding into the hum. There will be no temples, it said. No prayers. Only listening. When hearts open, I will be there. The air shimmered, and the beam began to dissolve, not dying but dispersing. Its light flowing to the tree's veins, its tone merging with the rhythm of existence. Every heartbeat in every realm now carried a faint echo of its voice. Kelda took Runa's hand. It's gone. No, Runa said. It's become everything that can understand. The wind shifted, gentle and new. Across the 9 realms, the first dawn since creation's silence broke, clear, balanced, alive. And within it, beneath every sound and behind every silence, the faintest hum endured, warm, patient, infinite, the voice of the echo god, whispering in every language at once. Listen long enough, and even silence will speak. The hall of the slain had never been so still. The banners that once blazed with gold hung dim as embers, and the air trembled with the weight of what had been spoken across the worlds. Runa stood before the throne, harp in hand, its strings dark with the ash of thunder and the memory of Egil's song. The gods had gathered, not as conquerors but as judges. Odin sat high and silent, his single-eyed son of cold fire. Freya, radiant and sorrowful, kept her hands folded, while Thor's spectral outline flickered in the air beside her, his presence neither living nor gone. Around them, The benches of Valhalla were filled not with warriors, but with silence itself, shaped like men and women who had no more need for sound. "Runa of Midgard," said Odin, voice deep enough to rattle the rafters. "You have played the forbidden chord. You woke what was meant to rest. You opened the tree's heart, and in doing so, you have broken the boundary between silence and divinity." Runa lifted her gaze, unafraid. "And what boundary was that, All-Father? The one that kept truth from breathing?" The hum stirred faintly through the hall. The echo of Yggdrasil's song still resoned beneath all things. The god shifted, uneasy. Freya's lips parted. "You claim perfection requires silence. Do you call the music of creation imperfect?" Runa bowed her head slightly. "I call it incomplete." Gasps rose, soft, like the hiss of distant waves. Even Thor's shadow flickered angrily at her words. "Perfection," she continued, her voice steady, "is not endless sound nor endless stillness. It's the moment they meet, the space between breath and word. You have worshipped noise and feared quiet. You built halls of feasting so you would not have to hear the truth echoing in your own hearts." Odin leaned forward, his voice trembling between wrath and weariness. "And what truth is that, mortal?" "That the gods were never eternal," Runa said. "Only the song was. You mistook your echo for creation's voice." The hall darkened. The torches guttered out, as if ashamed to listen. Lightning flickered behind the All-Father's throne, painting his face in the pale glow of remembered storms. "You speak as though you know what lies beyond us," Odin said. "I don't," Runa answered. "But I've heard it. The tree hums with what you would not hear. The world forgiving you, even after all your forgetting." The harp in her hands began to vibrate. The sound was low, defiant, holy. The same resonance that had once undone the heavens now returned in gentler form, a pulse, a reminder. "Silence is not rebellion," she said, her voice rising. "It's understanding. You call it blasphemy because you cannot command it, but the world has listened back, and it no longer needs your permission to speak." The echo that followed her words filled Valhalla. Shields along the walls trembled, their ancient dents glowing faintly. The sound wove through the rafters like light through smoke. Freya closed her eyes, tears of molten gold streaking her cheeks. "She's right," she whispered. "We were never perfect. We were loud." Odin's hand tightened on Gungnir. "Do you think you have freed them, then?" "Freed us." Runa stepped forward, harp cradled like a heart. "No, All-Father. I reminded you that freedom was never yours to give." The hall shuddered. The warriors carved from silence stirred, their hollow eyes brightening, as if the old noise within them was finally yielding to calm. Thor's ghost looked to her, the storm in him softening. "What would you have us do?" he asked quietly. "Listen," Runa said, "to what you called imperfection, to what waits in every pause." For a long time none spoke. Then Odin stood, the weight of eternity visible in the slow rise of his frame. His eye gleamed with something between rage and reverence. "You have named what even I would not," he said, "and for that you are guilty." Runa bowed her head. "Then I accept my trial." He raised his spear, but instead of striking, he lowered it to the floor. The sound it made was not thunder but resonance, echoing across the hall and into the very roots of Yggdrasil. "Your crime," Odin said, "is truth, and truth cannot be unspoken." The hum deepened again, carrying through the vaulted ceilings, through the realms, through the soil and the sky. The gods closed their eyes, and for the first time in their long memory, Valhalla itself fell truly silent. No feasting, no clamor, no glory. Only the sound of understanding. Runa stood alone in the center of that quiet, the harp's last note fading into the stillness she had spent her life teaching them to hear. And somewhere above, in the voice of the newly born echo god, came the faintest whisper, audible only to those who had stopped speaking long enough to deserve it. Perfection was never sound or silence. It was the courage to stand between them. The storm gathered without warning, born not from clouds, but from will. The great hall of Valhalla, cracked and trembling from Runa's trial, shuddered as the All-Father rose, his cloak unfurled into thunderclouds, his single eye burning like the last star before dawn. Wind coiled around him, singing of ages when he alone commanded the storm. Play, mortal, Odin said, his voice breaking like surf on iron. Let us see if your truth can survive the noise of gods. Runa lifted her harp. The strings, darkened by divine ash, shimmered with faint starlight. This isn't a battle, she said softly. It's a remembering. The first note she played was fragile, an echo of Egil's final heartbeat, the hush between lightning and thunder. It moved through the air like breath, weaving into the rafters of the hall. Odin answered. His hand rose, and the sky tore open above them. Lightning spiraled downward, striking the floor, shattering stone into molten glass. Thunder rolled through the air, vast and wounded. But Runa did not stop. She plucked another string, then another, each note steadying the storm instead of defying it. The sound wound around the thunder's roar, not resisting but shaping it. Melody folding into fury, rhythm softening rage. Odin's eyes narrowed. You play against me. Runa's voice carried over the wind. No, I play with you. The storm hesitated. Lightning hung suspended in the air like frozen tears. The thunder pulsed slower, sinking to her rhythm. She played the sounds he had buried inside himself. The note of his first victory, the lament of his first sacrifice, the sigh of the world when he tore his eye away for wisdom. Every strike of his storm became a chord in her song. Every chord of her heart became a pulse in his thunder. Together they shaped something the world had never heard, confession in sound. Odin's voice broke through the music, raw and thunderless. I silenced the world because I feared what it would tell me. I crowned myself with storms, so I would not hear the small things die. Runa's reply was not words but harmony, a note so soft it carried the weight of forgiveness. The thunder gentled. Rain began to fall, though no cloud remained above. Each drop landed with a tone, forming a rhythm older than battle, older than time. I thought silence meant control. Odin said, his tone weakening, humanizing. But it was blindness. You have made me see that truth is not quiet. It's endless. And understanding, Runa whispered, is the sound we mistake for silence. The wind eased. The storm unwound itself into color, streaks of gold and violet weaving through the hall like breath returning to a body. Runa's harp glowed, its strings still vibrating without her touch. Odin stepped closer, his thunder fading to a low hum. You've stolen the voice of the storm. Runa met his gaze, calm as dawn. No, All-Father. I returned it. He looked at her for a long time, and then, slowly, he knelt, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The thunder inside him dimmed the quiet heartbeat rhythm, the same pulse that had always lived in the roots of Yggdrasil. When he spoke again, it was not command but confession. The storm and the song were never enemies. Runa smiled faintly, tears glinting like light through rain. No, they were the same voice, finally listening. And as her last note dissolved into the hush of the hall, Valhalla's broken ceiling opened to the dawn. The storm clouds drifted apart, and for the first time since the gods were young, the air over Asgard was utterly still, yet full of sound. The duel of voices had ended, not in conquest, but in clarity. From that moment forward, thunder would never strike without melody, and music would never play without a trace of rain. The hall was not ready for him. When Loki entered Valhalla, the air folded in on itself. Shadows lengthened. Laughter tried to rise and failed. His smile, that sharp, mercurial thing that once reshaped the world, trembled like a dying flame. The gods watched warily, those who still had the courage to peer. Odin leaned on Gungnir, silent. Runa stood near the center, harp slung at her side, the echo still vibrating faintly in her bones. The world had changed, and now even tricksters were being called to account. Loki clapped his hands once. The sound fell flat. No applause, he said lightly, though his voice cracked in the middle. A pity. I used to get such music out of your disapproval. No one answered. Only the faint hum of Yggdrasil's living song filled the silence. He frowned. Ah, you hear it too, don't you? The echo. My echo. You've been chasing it like a hound chasing its own tail. Runa stepped forward. You started it. Loki's smile faltered, then steadied again, brittle as glass. Of course I did. What else was left to do? Freya's voice was quiet. You unleashed out of cruelty. He shook his head. No, dear goddess, out of boredom. Cruelty was only the instrument. He walked slowly between the tables of the hall, trailing a finger along the empty goblets of the fallen. Do you know what it's like to live in a world where everything has already been spoken? Every joke told, every lie believed, every truth punished? I thought, perhaps, if I broke the rhythm, something new might answer. And it did, Runa said. Yes. He looked up at her then, his eyes ancient and tired. But not the way I expected. I wanted chaos to sing. Instead, it taught the world to listen. Do you understand what a cruel joke that is for me? The thunder that once obeyed, Odin now murmured faintly overhead, sympathetic. Loki tilted his head toward it. Even you learned to hum, he said softly. Runa's gaze softened. You weren't trying to destroy sound. You were trying to find someone who could hear you. For a moment, he said nothing. Then the laugh came, a low, broken sound that carried none of its old mischief. It echoed once, then turned wet. I thought the echo would answer me, he whispered. That somewhere in all that noise, I'd hear my own laughter coming back. But all I heard was the world remembering everything I'd done wrong. Tears welled in his eyes. They shimmered like mercury, burning faintly as they fell. Do you know what silence does to a trickster? It unmakes him. There's nothing to defy, nothing to twist. Only reflection. He looked toward Odin, his old father and adversary. I never wanted your throne, he said. Only your attention. I thought if I made enough noise, you'd finally look down and laugh with me, not at me. Odin's grip tightened on his spear, the wood groaning softly. And if I had... Loki smiled again, weak, forgiving. Then maybe the echo would have been a song, instead of a wound. Runa lifted her harp, fingers trembling. It can still be a song, she said. Loki blinked, startled. After everything I'd broken? Especially after that. He stared at her, the jest dying on his lips. The air shifted. The hum of Yggdrasil rose gently, cradling his silence like a child. Loki's tears fell faster, each drop ringing faintly as it hit the ground. The sound was delicate, pure, like laughter remembering itself. Do you hear that? He whispered. Runa nodded. The world forgiving you. He laughed once more, but this time the sound was quiet, clean, human. It rolled through the hall like a breeze, stirring ashes into light. And when it faded, Loki, the one who had unmade the echo, was finally still. His laughter remained behind, transformed into music, rising softly into the rafters of Valhalla like the sigh of a forgiven storm. The gods bowed their heads. Runa plucked one last string, and somewhere beyond sound, the trickster's tears turned to melody. It began at the edge of the world, where dawn and dusk folded into one another like mirrors, forgetting which side was real. The air shimmered with aftermath, the hum of Yggdrasil's song, the silence of gods finally listening, and the faint trace of laughter that had once belonged to Loki. And high above it all, a single raven circled, its feathers blacker than shadow and edged with gold. It had been Odin's once, the last of the divine messengers. But since the world had begun to sing again, it had grown restless, as if the rhythm beneath creation were calling it home. Its golden eyes reflected everything. The tree, the sky, the new dawns rising across the 9 realms, and something else. Longing, Runa saw it first, perched upon the highest root of Yggdrasil, trembling slightly. He's listening, she murmured. Kelda stood beside her, the frost light of her gift glinting faintly in her hair. To what? To the end of his duty, Runa said. The bird tilted its head, and a sound escaped its throat. Not a call, but a note, crystalline and small, like the first tear of ice melting under sunlight. The air quivered. The tree responded with a low vibration, a heartbeat answering a heartbeat. The raven opened its wings. Feathers rippled like molten night. Each beat struck sparks of sound into the air, tones that turned visible, scattering like fragments of forgotten songs. They drifted outward, falling over the realms like gold dust. When the first one touched the ground, Runa heard it, a lullaby from a mother who died before finishing the last verse. Another spark fell into the sea, where it became a whale's ancient song, long lost to the depths. Another landed in the mountains, echoing as a smith's final hammer strike, the one he never lived to hear. Every feather the raven shed became a sound the world had lost since the first frost, the laughter buried under fear, the whispers swallowed by war, the prayers left unfinished. Egil's name passed through the air like wind over stone, carried on one of those feathers. Runa felt it brush her cheek, and for a moment she heard him laugh again, the quiet, human sound of peace rediscovered. The raven's golden eyes glowed brighter, and the hum beneath the world deepened. He's undoing the silence, Runa whispered. All of it. Kelda's small hand gripped hers. But if he gives away all his feathers. Runa nodded, tears catching light. Then he'll have nothing left to carry him. The raven screamed, not in pain, but release. The sound tore through the sky, a cord so vast it bent the light around it. Every realm looked upward. The dead in Hell's garden raised their heads. The ocean stilled mid-wave. Even the gods froze, awed and afraid. Feathers burst outward in a final explosion of radiance, a storm of sound that crossed every border between life and death, word and silence. The air filled with voices, not in chaos, but in harmony. Every lost song, every buried truth, every muted confession, all at once, together. Then nothing. The light faded. The sound settled into a pulse that belonged to no one and everyone. Where the raven had been, only a shimmer remained, a halo of faint music suspended in the air, slowly dissolving into the roots of Yggdrasil. Runa and Kelda stood in silence. The world itself felt lighter, as though something ancient had unclenched its fist. "Where did he go?" Kelda asked at last. Runa smiled softly. "He didn't go. He became." The wind stirred then, gentle, carrying a sound that was not quite song, not quite silence. It brushed the leaves of the tree, rippled through the seas, and circled the heavens. The world exhaled. From that day on, whenever a voice rose in sorrow or a heart broke open in joy, a faint shimmer of gold would appear on the wind. Soft, fleeting, like a feather sound remembering how to fly. And in that eternal hum, the raven's last flight continued, scattering every forgotten melody until there were no lost songs left to find. It began with a sound too gentle to frighten, a note rising from beneath the earth, not mournful but steady, patient, inevitable. It threaded to the roots of Yggdrasil like light, through veins, seeping into every corner of the underworld. Hell lifted her face from the shadows. The realm around her pulsed faintly, as though breathing for the first time. The walls of her kingdom, once carved from stillness itself, began to tremble. The torches that had burned without flame flickered into color. She stood from her throne of stone and frost, and for the first time since she'd inherited death, her hands were warm. "The world hums," she whispered. "Even the quiet ones are stirring." Across the endless halls of her domain, the dead opened their eyes. No wailing, no rattle of chains, only small, astonished sighs. They did not rise to leave. There was no need, but they listened. Every ear that had ever closed in fear now opened. Every heart that had gone still found its rhythm again in the vibration of sound returning to creation. One by one, the dead began to sing. Their voices were fragile at first, like old glass warmed by sunlight. They sang not of longing but of release. Melodies with no words, harmonies of gratitude for every sound they had ever missed. Laughter, rain, the whisper of leaves, all of it came pouring out of them in a quiet symphony that filled the caverns of Hell's realm with light. Hell watched her mismatched face, half radiant, half ruined, softened by awe. "So," she murmured, "the silence was never my kingdom. It was only my guard." Above, the world shivered. The song of the dead seeped upward through soil and stone, curling into the roots of trees, the marrow of mountains, the very breath of the wind. In Midgard, the living heard it, not with ears, but with skin, with bones. Farmers paused mid-harvest, warriors mid-battle, mothers mid-lullaby. The air vibrated with sound too pure to name. For the first time since the first frost, the living did not flinch at it. A child dropped a plate and laughed at the shatter. A soldier wept at the crash of thunder, not from fear, but reverence. Even the animals stilled, then began to sing in their own ways, howl, hum, heartbeat, whisper. Runa heard it too. standing beneath Yggdrasil's branches. She pressed her palm to the trunk and felt the resonance. It was no longer a hum or a song. It was understanding itself, blooming through everything that lived and had lived. Hell has opened her gates, she said softly. The dead are not returning. They are remembering. Beside her, Kelda watched the aurora swirl through the air, each color moving to the rhythm of the underworld song. And we're learning to listen without fear. Runa nodded, her voice barely a breath. The undoing of silence isn't noise, it's acceptance. Across the realms, the harmony deepened. The dead sang, the living answered, and the space between them vanished. No prayer, no command, only resonance. In Hell's realm, the goddess looked up through the ceiling of her world, through stone and shadow and time. She could see the shimmer of dawn far above. So this, she said, is what they feared. Her voice joined the chorus, low, strong, steady. The sound climbed upward, filling every hollow that silence had ever claimed. And as it reached the heavens, the last barrier fell. No more walls between noise and quiet, life and death, word and meaning. Only vibration, gentle and endless, the pulse of being. The living no longer hushed children in storms. They no longer prayed for silence after loss. They understood now that every sound, the laughter, the grief, the wind, the cry, was life's proof that it still heard itself. And deep below, in the heart of Hell's quiet kingdom, the dead sang on, not to be remembered, but to remind the world that it no longer needed to fear the sound of its own soul. The sound that ended the age of sound began with a whisper. Odin rose from the throne of Valhalla, where light had flickered and truth had finally begun to echo back at him. His one eye, ancient and unguarded, no longer blazed with command. It wept light. The hall around him trembled with a hum that had rewritten creation. Runa stood before him, harp cradled like a wound, while the gods watched from the edges of the storm they had once ruled. Odin looked upon Gungnir, the spear that had never missed, forged from order and oath. It hummed faintly, vibrating against his grip, begging to remain whole. Order, he said quietly, is deaf. The spear splintered. The sound was soft, no thunder, no clash, just a single crack that traveled across the 9 realms like a heartbeat slowing down. Yggdrasil shuddered. The hum, which had once roared through every branch and vein, softened into stillness. The mountains exhaled. The seas held their breath. The trees glowed dimmed, not dying, but resting. Runa felt the music in her bones unwind, its pulse turning warm and human again. For the first time, the world did not need to sing. It simply was. Odin's hand fell open. The fragments of Gungnir hovered in the air like slivers of sunlight, dissolving into motes that drifted upward and disappeared into the aurora. The spear was my ear, he said. It heard only obedience, never meaning. Freya stepped forward, her voice barely above a sigh. And now the gods must listen as mortals do, Odin said, with doubt, with wonder. The hall, once deafened by eternal glory, fell silent. Not the heavy silence of fear or judgment. This was peace, tender and new. Runa plucked one final note, more memory than music. It rose like smoke, touched Odin's shadow, and vanished into the still air. The echo calmed. The hum quieted. The tree's roots sank deeper into the earth, no longer trembling with perfection, but steady in imperfection. When Odin turned from the throne, he was smaller, humbler, a wanderer once more. Perfection was the last lie, he said. The world will live better without it. And the gods bowed their heads, not in worship, but in understanding. From that day forward, thunder no longer commanded, music no longer begged, and silence no longer feared itself. The realms breathed together in uneven rhythm, flawed, free, alive. The age of perfection ended not with triumph, but with listening. It began with the dust. The ruins of Valhalla, once the monument of triumph, later the stage of confession, lay quiet beneath the pale shimmer of dawn. The broken pillars, the cracked shields, the splintered throne, all fragments of an age that had mistaken eternity for meaning, waited weightless in their silence. But the world had learned to hum again, and even ruin could not resist rhythm forever. A faint vibration moved through the air, a heartbeat returning to the hollow chest of heaven. It came not from thunder this time, nor from Odin's voice, but from everything else. The living, the dead, the branches of Yggdrasil, even the soft breaths of mortals dreaming far below. The hum gathered, low and slow, weaving to the golden dust that hung where the hall had fallen. And then Valhalla began to breathe. The floor lifted first, not rebuilt by hands, but remembered by sound. Stone reassembled not in symmetry, but in pulse, like muscle instead of marble. Cracks remained. Scars gleamed faintly where the fractures met. The walls followed, rising not straight but curving, flowing, as if built to accommodate wind and laughter instead of war. Runa stood at the edge of the forming hall, watching in wonder. Her harp hung silent at her back, yet she could feel each string vibrating with the rhythm of rebirth. "It's singing itself back," she whispered. Beside her, Kelda smiled. "It remembers how to live, not how to last." The rafters unfurled like ribs, open to the sky. No roof closed them in. Instead, clouds drifted freely through, each carrying a fragment of color. Some gray, some gold, some still bruised by the memory of storm. The light filtered through the gaps, shifting with the hours, painting the hall in patterns that changed but never repeated. Odin stood among the gods who had remained, his spear now only memory. His gaze followed the reconstruction with quiet awe. "So the hall we built for perfection remakes itself in imperfection," he said. Freya's laughter, soft and true, broke the silence. Perfection could never hold this much life. As the last of the debris turned to dust and the new hall settled, the sound that lingered was not a hymn, nor a command. It was breathing. The walls inhaled, the floors exhaled. A living rhythm pulsed through the space. The air smelled of rain and smoke and beginnings. From the broken throne rose a table instead, wide and unadorned. Upon it appeared no feast, no golden cups, only instruments, harps, flutes, drums carved from the hollow bones of forgotten wars. Each hummed softly, waiting. Runa approached the table. Her fingers brushed the wood, and the hall responded with a low tone, deep and patient. "It doesn't want glory," she said. "It wants company." Odin nodded. "Then let it be a place for listening, not conquest." And so the gods sat not above, but among. They laid their weapons down, not in surrender, but in rhythm, each blade and hammer adding a new tone to the floor's gentle hum. The sound wove upward, filling the space like a heartbeat echoed across time. From the roots below, the dead answered with song. From the branches above, the living joined in laughter. For the first time, the music of all worlds met in harmony not perfect, but true. Kelda leaned against Runa's arm. "Will it stay like this?" Runa smiled, watching the light shift across the breathing walls. "No, it will change every day, every sound. That's what keeps it alive." And as the first evening settled over the rebuilt hall, the new Valhalla exhaled. Its pillars glowed softly, like lanterns carved from twilight. The hum beneath it steadied into something warm, irregular, human. The gods listened. The tree listened. The world listened. And for the first time since the dawn of time, Valhalla, the hall of the slain, had become a sanctuary for the living. A house not of silence or perfection, but of rhythm, breath, and forgiveness. The hall no longer waited for heroes. It waited for songs. The evening was quiet, yet the quiet pulsed. The new Valhalla breathed gently around her, walls of rhythm, beams of memory, air alive with a hum that had replaced eternity. Runa stood alone in its center, the harp against her chest, its strings catching the dim gold of the hour before night. The gods lingered at the edges of the hall, watching, understanding without speaking. She had no throne, no altar, no title, only the song left in her hands. The hum beneath her feet matched her heartbeat, slow and tender. She could feel Yggdrasil's pulse answering, the same tone that had carried her since the first moment the world remembered how to listen. But tonight, the hum was asking for something more. It wasn't calling her to act. It was asking her to rest. Odin was the first to step forward. He no longer towered above anyone. The light of divinity now lived behind his eyes, dim and kind. "You've given the world its voice again," he said. "You could stay and teach us what to do with it." Runa smiled faintly. No one needs to be taught how to listen anymore. Kelda ran to her and grasped her cloak, her small hands cold as memory. Then don't go. The songs aren't finished. Runa knelt, pressing her forehead to the child's. Every song finishes itself, she whispered. The rest is only echo. She rose, slowly, and stepped to the center of the hall. The gods drew back, not out of fear, but reverence. The harp shimmered in her hands, not with light, but with pulse, a mirror of her own heart. She began to play. The first note was small, intimate. It carried across the hall like a breath through candlelight, steady and unhurried. The second note followed, deep as roots. The third trembled, the sound of a river remembering its path. Together they built into something larger than melody, yet too human to be divine. No one moved. Even the air seemed to hold itself still. Runa played her heartbeat, not the rhythm of power, nor the music of creation, just the simple sound of being alive and ready to stop. Each note she drew was slower than the last, softer, closer to silence, but never quite surrendering to it. Odin closed his eye. Freya's tears fell onto her palms, turning to dew. Thor's ghost flickered once beside a beam of light, his thunder quiet and listening. The final verse was not played with fingers but with breath, a vibration that came from within her, crossing the strings and the air and the bones of the hall. The sound moved through everything alive and everything that had ever been. It touched the gods. It reached the dead. It found the roots of Yggdrasil and trembled there. Runa smiled as she played the last note, and the harp answered not with sound, but with stillness so pure it shone. Her fingers lingered on the strings. The pulse beneath her feet slowed, matching her own until the two were indistinguishable. Her breath shallowed. The light in her eyes dimmed, not gone, only dispersing. Kelda clutched at the air where her teacher stood, but Runa's body was already light, dissolving into the rhythm that had carried her through gods and death and silence alike. Her harp fell gently into her place, still humming faintly, each string resonating with her parting pulse. No god spoke. No wind dared move. Even thunder bowed its head. And then the hall exhaled. The harp's final tone spread outward, rolling across the 9 realms like dawn returning. It reached every ear and every silence, whispering the same truth, that every end was just a sound learning to rest. Odin placed his hand on the harp, eyes lowered. She played the shape of peace, he said. Freya nodded, and left the world tuned to it. High above, Yggdrasil shimmered once in a soft vibration, half heartbeat, half memory, passed through its roots. The world hummed in time. No one saw when Runa's light joined the aurora, but from that night onward, whenever the wind moved through Valhalla's open rafters, it carried the faint rhythm of a human heart, steady, forgiving, eternal. The gods never interrupted that melody. They only listened. The sound began as a tremor too small for divinity to notice. A single note, unowned, untamed, rose to the roots of Yggdrasil and into the ribs of the 9 realms. It passed through Hell's Garden, where the dead still sang in low harmony. It touched the seas, where the memory of thunder slept. It brushed the peaks of Jotunheim, waking the mountains that had once learned to breathe. And finally, it reached Valhalla, the hall that had learned at last to listen. The sound did not ask permission. It arrived. The walls of the hall pulsed once. Then again, the rhythm sinking to the heartbeat of the world. Every stone, every beam, every scar of the old war began to vibrate in sympathy. The gods looked up, startled, not in fear, but in recognition. Odin's single eye widened, and for the first time in ages he smiled. "She's still playing," he whispered. Outside, the air shimmered with resonance. Across the heavens, the aurora swirled an impossible rhythm. Each color a tone, each tone a memory. The tree that hummed began to sway, not from wind but from joy. Its branches moved like the arms of a conductor guiding an orchestra of existence. The echo that Runa had left behind, her final heartbeat turned into sound, had not ended with her death. It had ripened. It had learned to listen to itself. And now, every world, every soul, every silence answered back. From the mountain's hollow came the deep bass of stone. From the sea's depth came the roll of waves in time. From the hearts of mortals came the tremble of longing, laughter, forgiveness. From the dead came the harmony of remembrance, soft and certain. All of it merged, no longer echo, no longer division. The gods felt the vibration pass through them, stripping away their grandeur and leaving only what was true. Freya laughed through tears, and her voice became melody. Thor's ghost let go of thunder, letting his laughter take its place. Even Loki's faint echo flickered across the rafters. No trick this time, only applause. Valhalla could not contain it. The sound was too vast for architecture, too alive for walls. The hall began to open, not crumble, not fall, but unfold, its structure unraveling into pure resonance. The rafters stretched outward into sky, beams of tone becoming rays of light. The pillars melted into air that shimmered like gold dust. And still, the song grew. Across the 9 realms, every being heard the same refrain, not in language, but in meaning. You are sound. You are silence. You are heard. The tree vibrated so deeply that its roots brushed the edges of what had once been chaos, turning the void into harmony. The stars above trembled, blinking in rhythm, their light flickering like the plucked strings of Runa's immortal harp. Then came the breaking. Valhalla burst, not destroyed, but transcended. The sound became pure emotion, dissolving the hall into rhythm. Every echo that had ever existed, of laughter, of prayer, of thunder, of grief, wove together into music. Not a song of gods, not of mortals, but of everything. Creation had never stopped. It had only been waiting to be heard. Odin fell to his knees, overtaking age. His broken spear reformed as vibration, humming in his hand before fading into air. So this is what silence was guarding, he said. Freya touched his shoulder. And this is what perfection feared. The sound softened. The music did not end. It became the pulse of being itself. The world spun in tune, the trees swayed, and for the first time since the first word was spoken, the universe was not echoing. It was listening back. And somewhere in that vast, breathing harmony, the faintest thread of Runa's melody lingered. Steady, luminous, eternal. The gods knew better than to speak. For the echo that had broken Valhalla had not ended it. It had turned it into a song. And creation, at last, was singing along.